The meeting will come to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Iannarino.
Here.
Goddard.
Here.
Kane.
Here.
Khan.
Here.
Smoka.
Here.
Chupai.
Here.
Long. Okay.
And the mission of School District 15 is to produce world-class learners by building a connected learning community. Pledge.
Please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks for coming, Lynn. We need the camera pan out so we can see the big, huge audience.
So the intent of this first half hour is to get some sustenance. So we're going to eat while we talk, but I thought there should be some discussion about protocol. I do have those questions printed up that I presented to you earlier if you would choose to use those. But I think, you may want to talk about considering a 45-minute time frame, 20 minutes for the presentation, 25 minutes for discussions, and then dismiss the group and then just have a dialogue about a particular presentation, pluses and minuses, and start up with the next one at the top of the hour.
Did we give them a time frame? Like, you have 20
I
minutes to
told
speak
them
here?
when they
You
communicated that multiple occasions that they got a 20-minute presentation and about 25 minutes for Q&A. But this is it's up to you all what you want to do. We could run over if you've got somebody that's really engaging. You want to make the other ones wait. You can do that. We can go till midnight. It's up to you. Whatever you want to do. I don't know if you want to talk about which questions are most important for you to ask or things you've been thinking about.
As in the Q&A you're talking, right? Because they will all be prepared with a presentation.
They will.
So I had a question. I don't know if
I have
it's
three I got it covered.
I don't know if it's a them question or like an internal question,
You've got it already? Yeah.
which is about who is typically included in the interviewing committee.
I
at
think
each
that's
phase.
very important to ask who the team is going to be, and then you can ask specific questions about their experience. Because really, you're hiring the people that are on the team, not the firm as much, because the firm stands behind the people, but it's the people doing the interaction, screening the people, interviewing screening the potential applicants.
And I'm thinking our team too. So when we do first and second interviews, who's typically included at each level?
Barb, during
Your
that,
cabinet versus principals, what's the typical makeup of interviewing teams? Like, should we ask them what their recommendations are?
I would ask them, and they're going to, defer to you, but I would say there's a gamut. A lot of times, the board themselves just will interview like 6 finalists and then reduce it down to 3. And then usually what I've seen is many people then go to dinner and they have a dinner with each one of the finalists, 3 finalists that interview them over dinner. You get to see them in a little different setting, a little different kind of context. And then if you're able to select one, you can do that with 2, you can do it with 3, whatever you want. But then if you're able to select one, you can go visit their current place of employment and do a site visit. The problem, Barb, with including like cabinet members and community members and things, all 3 of these firms, I think, are advocating for confidential search, so that these people that are in current jobs don't necessarily need to notify their communities or their Board of Education that they're actually interviewing. It would be their choice to do that. But if you think of somebody that they're one of the 3 finalists and they don't get the job, then they're going to go back to this other place. The people say, oh, you don't want to work here. So that's why it's a little bit more confidential, just to keep it at the board level and let the board make the decision.
Yeah, and I saw there was opportunity just on a general level to get input from the community as far as qualifications and such that we're looking for in a superintendent. Which I think that's good because you don't have to worry about the confidentiality aspect of it.
Right.
I mean, it pretty much goes for anybody looking for a job, right? You don't want your employer to know you're looking for a job. And that's pretty uncomfortable in general.
I had gone to the superintendent search
Session.
the session that was at the convention in November, and they specifically talked about that, Barb, but they gave multiple options. One of them was what said where it was very much about confidentiality, and if you open up to public, whether it's public discussion, public commentary, or it's people more than the board, so it's non-confidential, that there will be candidates on the front end that won't apply because of that. So to be cognizant of that. And then they gave other options where they did, if it was important to have cabinet members involved, that they did like round-robin interviews where you would have a candidate, assuming all candidates would agree to no lack of confidentiality, and then you might have 3 rooms going, one that would have cabinet members in it, one that would have board members in it, one that would have members of the public potentially, or 2 rooms. They gave that as an option.
Like cabinet members, if we included cabinet members or principals or whomever, could we not ask them to sign
Yeah, you could.
something for like a clause of confidentiality so
Yeah.
as not to divulge any information about the people interviewing?
You could do that. I mean, you could, and
could
they would be
get-
confidential.
You could get a group of people from the community, like a select group, and then have them sign confidentiality agreements if they want to participate in the interviewing process.
I'm not totally sold on that, but I think community involvement is important in some aspects, and I noticed at least, 2 out of the 3 made a very specific point of the whole, doing a survey for all constituents in the community and the staff up front, which I
Yeah.
think is so important. I was kind of surprised that the 3rd one didn't include
Yeah.
that as part of the plan. I mean, I think that's just a given.
Yeah, and because I do think that it makes sense to at least have that involvement, at least up front, where you've gotten some level of finding out from the community what their desires are. And just coming off of the front end of strategic planning, where we asked the ranking of importance of different things for strategic planning, that was valuable, because although some of the things that ended up high were things that I think we would have all come up with anyway, some of those where they hit on the list were surprising to me when the community came into play. So
And I think, I'm assuming that they typically have like a survey tool that they use regularly and consistently, because it allows them to compare back to what they've seen in other places. But I would like us to have the ability to adapt it. I feel like in the strategic planning session, there were a lot of things I felt were missing. I think we talked about that in our group. I think we were in the same group. There were a number of things I think we either guessed at or included in something else within the survey, or what they were guessing at what they were meaning, because they didn't feel like it was exactly clear. So I'd want to be able to have the ability to customize that to some extent.
questions from the community? Since we've got a lot of representation, can we just be part of the conversation, Scott? Is that allowed? All right. But it's
You
allowed.
want us to use the mic?
Or yeah, sure. Yeah, for the tape.
For recording.
For us, no, but for the recording, yes.
No, appreciate the chance to kind of join in the conversation. Just a couple of thoughts, if I can. First of all, Scott, I think I envy you in terms of the timing of your impending retirement, because I think there's a lot of change happening, and you'll be, can I say, in the benevolent way, I think all the changes there are going to be very interesting and challenging, but I'm sure you're looking forward to your retirement and saying someone else can take care of it from now on. Thanks for your service anyway.
I think it is good timing, yes.
No. Okay, so we're in agreement on that. Good. But just really in terms of the some of the thoughts I have about the search for our next superintendent, I think there's immense change building and at an increasing rate on a macro level. Global educational competitiveness. for me, is a big thing, because I think the USA schools have slipped compared to what other countries in the world have been able to do. And it's, much as we try, there's still things that are being done very well in other countries, and I wonder how we can absorb some of those things to the extent that they are pertinent. But the reality is that competitiveness is growing, it's not slowing. Somewhere in between that and micro is what I call the utter chaos of the public finances of the state in which we live, and a lot of very unattractive factors that just don't do well for public financing, whether it's schools or other services from state government. It's an utter disaster, exacerbated by a recent announcement by 3 economists from the Federal Reserve that a 1% property tax for the next 30 years is the only way to fix the pension problem. That's guaranteed to make people feel very happy about their house prices, and the consequence of additional taxation without much improvement. But anyway, on a micro level, I think the issue is being able to understand, and I think our strategic planning process is helping this, what are the community needs and concerns about the district going forward? What does that mean for the board's strategic planning for the district, and what does it mean for the future type of leadership that we need in that? I think one of the factors that in the 26 years I've been here and seen my kids go through the education system and understand what you guys go through from a board oversight point of view and from a school administration point of view, whether at the district level, Scott, with you and your team, or whether it's the principals and teachers and department heads, is school districts seem to be becoming more of an integrated social welfare services provider. But they were predicated and founded and intended to be financed as an education service provider. But the reality is that there's that significant blurring of the lines. How does one look at that in terms of how the district should operate, and how does that have an impact on the composition of the district's leadership structure, etc.? So those are my thoughts for now, and look forward to the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jane? You sure?
Is it good? What'd you order? Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah. I agree with you with the, when you talk about social welfare service provision, that's absolutely true, and I think we see that more and more, and going through what, Zubera has with the equity committee, even seeing and becoming more aware of those concerns and issues within our school district. We have a very large, very diverse, very complex school district, and being more involved at the level that we all are at this point, it becomes that much more apparent as you pay attention to surrounding districts, and you talk to other board members, and they're in a district that has 4 schools, and they talk about their issues, and then you ask how many schools, and they say 4, and you stop and you think, well, yeah, okay, that's thank you for your service and your time, but there's significantly less complexity that's coming with 2 schools or 4 schools or 6 schools than 20. And so then you get into the social welfare, as you indicated, and ours is on a much larger scale with a lot more needs and more complex offerings that need to be there with finite funding. And it is something that I think we need to pay attention to, because if we don't service the children that fall into the gap, that are, that attached to our achievement gap issues, that gap widens, and those students suffer for it, but the school district suffers for it also. And at some point, the students that are not in that achievement gap become impacted.
We want to make sure that when kids are in the classroom, they're ready and able to learn and that requires us to partner with a lot of organizations in the community so they can provide a lot of services to those kids so that they're best suited for learning when they come to the school. So they got mental health care, they got physical health care, they've got housing, that they've got food, that they've got the medical care they need. So we're reaching out to a number of organizations, working with them, partnering with them, and we continue to see how we can enhance that. I think you're aware of this United Palatine Coalition that's working together, and I think that has a lot of potential to really make an impact on the community. And I do think it will help us in our role of educating kids, because it'll help those kids be ready to learn when they get to the classroom.
Did you guys all get the survey? I think it came from POC. There was I believe I got it via email initially. It was, I think I got it because of my email address being attached to the bridge, but I'm not sure. But it was a survey asking for input in terms of community needs, services. I mentioned the Boys and Girls Club concern, Jane, in my response to that, and I thought did I forward that survey to you? I'll look for it. But I thought it was great that they were sending something out, because they're clearly trying to see what additional things the community might think that are needed, or services that are part of that. It might have come from the Park District, now that I'm thinking about it. I think it was the Park District. Personal. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was from the Park District, because then it covered a lot of organizations within the community, and then it asked about your knowledge and awareness, your involvement in terms of volunteer time, if you volunteered, if you didn't, if you donated, what you understood as far as their services, what they provided, who they provided them to. It was a pretty good survey.
Getting back to the interviews, I think it might be good if we can agree to allow the groups to make their entire presentation before asking questions. I think they could get derailed, we could miss some things. So if you have a question or a concern, write it down and then we'll address it afterwards. That'd probably be fair for everybody. I will be the timer. I'll let them know when 20 minutes is up. So. Yeah, right. No, Dave and I get a little shaky when we see red and yellow cards. You know, they don't make us feel very good. Gotten too many over the years.
No, I play clean.
Just by accident.
Just to follow up, folks, is there anything on the RD15 voice medium that we could use to spread the information and to?
I think when we get to the point of community engagement, to help make sure to push out the link or whatever the survey is, would be really helpful.
So I think once the board has landed on a firm that they think can meet their needs, help them the best, they'll sit down with that firm and they will create a timeline, and they'll decide all the facets of the search that will occur. And definitely one of them will be gaining input from the community, and that at that point I think that could be a really useful help to get people to participate in getting that information to their groups. They probably will have online, and they'll sit down with people in person to kind of gather some of that information. So both of those venues will be available.
I mean, all the search firms had a pretty well-defined process that they go through. And there are, little differences, but they're fairly similar. It's good to see that, well-defined and with a timeline. So we can, like I said, once we pick somebody, we disseminate that to the community.
So the first group presenting will be the ECRA group, Hazard, Young, and Atia. The people that will be coming tonight are Hank Dimitro, and Hank is a former assistant superintendent in this district. He was a curriculum person here many years before he became a superintendent. And Jane Westerhold, who was the superintendent of the year a few years ago, and she retired just recently from displaying 62. But she has been working in Highland Park as an interim superintendent there, trying to calm the waters up there. She was working with Ed Rafferty, who's a resident in our district, who was the previous superintendent in District 54. So they were doing an interim thing. So that'll be the first group. The second group will be School Exec Connect, and Gary Zabilka was the superintendent in District 70, and Harry Rossi was the district superintendent in Northbrook. Harry Rossi works for FedEd, which is and National Lewis, yeah. And so they'll be here for that. Gary lives in, I think he lives like Long Grove up there. And then Mark Friedman will be coming from the Bicker Group, and he'll be bringing 3 other people with him, I guess. Ann Nolan, who is a retired superintendent and from the kind of the west side, and then Phil, somebody who's a retired superintendent from Indiana, but now is a superintendent in a small district in West Chicago. And the last person that'll be coming will be Joe Porto, and Joe works for Northern Illinois University, and he also was the superintendent in Avoca. So they've all done many searches, and so that's the people who will be coming tonight.
Do you have experience with any of them at this point, Scott?
Yeah, I do. Mark Friedman hired me for my first job many, many years ago in Lincolnwood. So he got me started, encouraged me to go into administration. So, and then Mark and I were superintendents up at Lake County together when I was up there, and he was superintendent there. Jane and I worked together in Schaumburg, and we've been colleagues for many, many years. Joe Porto's wife taught in my district when I was a principal. She taught in my building, actually. Very, very good, excellent math teacher. Yeah, I know them all.
Many.
Yeah, Gary Zabilka currently is working for the Illinois Association of School Administrators as a field representative for that group, and so he's working with a number of different superintendents in the northern region of Illinois. So they're all quality people.
Did you get recruited through one of them?
I'm sorry?
Did you get recruited through one of them?
All of them actually asked me to interview, and I did at different times with all 3 of them.
So that was one question I had. I feel like with today's, with the internet being what it is and it being so easy to access jobs, you can tell that at least one of them has probably a bigger network than the others. But I feel like it's not such a big deal today, given that anyone who's looking for a superintendency position should be able to find it with or without the help of a search firm. Do you think that's true?
So would you ask that one more time, Barb?
So pretty much, I guess, the easiest way to boil it down is how much should we factor in the size of the search firm's network? Because I feel like if you're looking, you're going to find the posting.
Right, I think you will, and they will encourage people that, like Gary asked me to apply for Glenview when it was open. I said, no, I'm really satisfied here, thank you for contacting me. But, so they know people that would be good fits for particular jobs, and so I don't think the size of the firm is going to benefit you at all, really. The other thing is that Illinois right now, it used to be very attractive for people to retire in other states and come here and work. It's not anymore because of Tier 2 retirement, you got to work at least 10 years, and there's a cap on how much you can earn, and so it's not as lucrative for people to leave another state and come here anymore. And they've made it a little challenging to actually get your superintendent endorsement from another state. So you're probably going to only get people to apply that are really here, unless, somebody's really wanted to come to Chicago for another reason, and they're young, and they want to work here a long time. But they will find the postings. I don't think the size of the firm is going to...
Okay.
Bob, you raise a good point about the selection process. The firms are going to look at a number of applicants and end up with a short list, and you're going to end up picking one. And in the consulting world, I have the same kind of challenge. If you're looking for someone, you reach out to the first point is you reach out to your network because you get trusted referrals. But one of the risks of that is that unless you're constantly networking, you don't come across people who might be just as good. But if you never meet them, you run the risk of not being able to refer them. So it's more a technique about how they evaluate them, because in the corporate world, applicant tracking systems do a fantastic job of eliminating people mechanically. Okay, you don't get to see the person.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. Hey there.
Hi.
We're just finishing our dinner, or kind of planning for these sessions, but glad you're here.
Thank you very much.
I told them who was coming, but I didn't mention that Sarah, who is the former superintendent at Arlington Heights 25, is joining them tonight. It's a surprise.
I think I'm in your packet, though.
Yeah, you were. Dr. Sarah Jerome, Dr. Jane Westerhold, and Dr. Hank Dimitro. And as I said, Hank used to come here on a regular basis. He was, how does it feel to be back?
Several lifetimes ago at this point, so that was back in the 90s, so lots has happened since then.
So, we ready to go, Lisa?
Yes. Yeah.
So we've allotted you 20 minutes for your presentation, and then 25 minutes for the group to ask you questions and dialogue with you afterwards. Is that sufficient? Okay.
Great. Terrific.
I'll be the timer. I'll say when there's 5 minutes left, just to give you a heads up, okay?
Okay. We thought we would start with an overview, introductions of ourselves, and then an overview of the process, and a little bit highlights of some of the information in the proposal, and leave the vast majority of time to try to address your questions, because most of the information that we were sharing in terms of the presentation is highlighted in the proposal already. My name's Hank Dimitro again. I am the Chief Search Associate for Hazard Young and ATIA, and a lifelong educator prior to that, in all of my career in Illinois, from a special ed teacher through a superintendent. My stint in Palatine was as assistant superintendent of instruction in the 90s, and then I went on to Carroll Stream School District to become superintendent there for 11 years. So, and when I retired, I became the president of HYA to do searches, and I've had the privilege of doing searches all over the country over the last 7, 8, 9 years. So I'll let Jane introduce herself.
Thank you. Delighted to be here tonight. By the way, I have to mention that Hank's very first search was the search conducted when I was hired, so it's just kind of interesting how these things
13
work
years
together.
ago.
I've been with HYAs and Associates since 2005. I'm also a lifetime educator, teacher, principal, assistant superintendent. I served 11 years as displaying 62 superintendent until 2016, and for the last 2 years, called back, failed retirement, and have been an interim superintendent in North Shore School District 112.
And Sarah?
Yes, hello. So glad to be here tonight with you. Thank you for having us. I have been a superintendent for 23 years, 15 years in the Kettle Moraine District in Wisconsin, and 8 years in Arlington Heights. and a total of 46 years with a variety of positions in public education, and have loved it all. It's been a calling, and it's been something that has brought great joy to my life and to our family, and we keep wanting to find ways to give back, and this is one of those ways of helping boards find their next leader so that they can carry on and do good work for the community that they're serving. The work that I've done includes some work as a national president of the American Association of School Administrators, AASA, and have enjoyed that along with Jane. We have done some work on the executive committee together and the governing board there, and so have had some opportunities nationally to get to know a lot of people, a lot of leaders, superintendents, as well as in the state. So it's a privilege to be here tonight to share what HYA can do for you.
Thanks. So I'm going to give just a very brief overview of the history of a little bit of background about the company, and I'm also here to address any of the questions that you might have about some of the press articles that you may have seen about some recent searches. And then after I do the introduction, Jane and Sarah are really going to talk about the process for the search, because they're the two people that will really be facilitating that for you throughout your search process. HYA has been assisting school boards across the country for well over 25 years. We've done 1,200 searches across the country, from little districts of 50 to 100 students to most recently, I just finished helping LA Unified, district of 650,000 students. So there's a vast range of size of school districts across the country. And the main focus of HYA is we're here to make the search process for you as successful as possible. We've done lots of searches. We can give you lots of pros and cons of various kinds of approaches and choices that you may want to make, and let you know what the ramifications may be. But ultimately, this is your search. You need to decide the process you want to follow, how you want to engage your community, how you want to interview candidates, who you want to have interview candidates. And our job is to make that process work for you and to facilitate that. And to facilitate your discussions and gather as much information for you as possible to allow you to make the decision of who you think the next superintendent for the Palatine School District needs to be. So our commitment to you is to customize the search to your needs. And we draw upon our experience to do that, but we also draw upon your wishes as a board and the knowledge that we gain from your community as we interact with them to do that search. So we're going to talk a little bit about the specifics of how a typical search process works, and then we'll talk a little bit about guarantees and answer questions. So.
Great. I'll start us off with the engagement step, and that's when we, after you've selected us.
In the folders that we just passed out, there's a one-page flow chart with the 4 stages of the search process on it.
We sit down with the board and discuss the whole process to find out if you have some particular interests in mind so that we can tailor that search for you. And then we begin to hear what you are looking for in your next superintendent, the qualities that you want us to seek out when we begin the recruitment phase. We also do that same process with the community. We have conversation groups that could be made up of parents, faculty, staff, any leaders in the community that you would like to have. Often we have those as separate conversation groups so that we can hear from them what they also expect. And we do that same thing online so that your entire school community can weigh in if they wish in survey form. And we have suggested in our timeline that that be a few weeks in September, so that you are having the opportunity for all people to participate. Then we bring that information back to you in the form of a profile that gives you a compilation of what we've heard from all these communities, bring it back to you so that you can know what your community groups would like to see, as well as develop the leadership profile. And we ask for your approval on that before we go forward with the search. And once that begins, then
Well, the leadership profile is a really critical part of this process. Before we can start recruiting, we need to understand what the Board of Education is looking for. We need to understand what your community is interested in. So that guides us. Obviously, people can apply online, and they do that through our system. However, we think the recruitment phase is really important because we're learning from the leadership profile what type of superintendent would be a good match for this Board of Education. And we're fortunate in HYA because we have offices on the East and West Coast. So we have associates nationally, and have even done some work internationally. With Sarah's work as the president of AESA, I was just recently the president of IASA, so that helps me understand the talent in Illinois. Being superintendent, I've worked with all the superintendents in Illinois from the bottom of the state to the top of the state. So we have a wide network that helps us understand who would be the best match for this district. Once we've identified people, we will call people that might not even have been considering looking for another position, but they might look like the perfect candidate to apply for this job. Then we would also do interviews. We do a lot of interviews intensely. Sarah and I would do that together. We also do reference checks. One of the things that helps us with our networking is that we don't necessarily want to call those that are on their resumes. We know a lot of superintendents, we know a lot of assistant superintendents that can give us some real details about the talent and the individual that we might be considering to bring forward to you. So we truly were looking for the best candidates, the best qualified candidates that seem to fit your district.
And then we get into the selection phase, and that brings up something that I think you'll find unique to HYA, and that is the board portal. The board has the opportunity to have its own portal, and we upload to your portal the applications of the candidates that we think you want to look at. And you examine those. We can put as many as you want on there, but typically it's 5 to 7. And then you can help us narrow that down. We can bring you 3 to 5 candidates. If you want more, we can bring you more. But typically, that works pretty well for boards. And on that board portal are a number of suggested questions that you might ask in an interview. And we have a process that we go through that process with you so that you feel confidence in the interview process for our superintendent. We also are ambassadors for your district, and we want to help you sell the district because likely these candidates are going to be people that are attractive, and we hope attractive not only to you but to other school districts perhaps. And so we want to be ambassadors for District 15 on your behalf to lure people here that you think might be good matches for you. And one of the other things that Jane and I want to say to you is that we would make a full commitment to the search and do no other searches except yours for the fall, which is, I believe you had indicated you wanted to be through with this search, complete by December. And we would make that commitment to you, that you would be our full attention for the search.
Do you want to touch on the transition phase?
Once the person has been selected, that you have worked out the contract and they come on the job, we are there also to help that new superintendent and the board learn to love each other. And so working together well is certainly an important aspect of moving into that successful superintendency. And we want to be there to support that process as well.
We have several guarantees that we put in the proposal that we make to you in terms of a fixed price guarantee that we don't charge by the hour or by the day. The price for the search is for the time that it takes to do that search until you hire somebody. So if for some reason you go through the first round of candidates and you don't find the right person, we have to bring back additional candidates. There's no additional fees that are charged to do that. We want you to be happy with the person that you select. We also make a commitment that we will not recruit or a candidate or accept an application from a candidate who you have hired as your superintendent for a period of 5 years, so that we're not taking a candidate and telling them 2 years from now, well, here's another great opportunity for you to consider, so that you have stability, because we really believe that stability in leadership is an important function of success in school districts. We have a 2-year commitment that if for some reason within the first 2 years, if the majority of the board stays in place and the superintendent leaves on his or her own, or for some reason you don't renew that person in those first 2 years, we'll come back and redo the search for you at no additional expense other than the expenses of conducting the search, no additional fees for services. And then we also have a price match guarantee that if you're getting proposals from other firms that are different than the pricing that we put on our proposal, and we feel that the service is comparable, we'll look at matching those prices in terms of making sure that you're getting the best value for your dollar in terms of the work that's being done. And part of it, we've touched a little bit on it in terms of some background checking information and some of the press information that has come out in a couple of searches that HYA has conducted. These may come up as questions that you want to delve into more, but I just want to address the fact that we are in a people business. We are working with human beings, both as associates and as candidates and as board members. And we're well aware of that in terms of making those kinds of decisions. Sometimes decisions are made and they're not the right decision at some point in time. Our commitment to boards when we work with them is to try to be your best agent and to be as supportive as we can to you as a board. And if something goes awry in the search process, we're happy to try to work through that with you. If something comes up that a mistake was made or an omission was made, we try to go back and correct our processes to improve that so it doesn't happen again, and that similar type of mistake does not repeat itself. And we try to give you all the information that we can gather. But we are dependent upon gathering information from other human beings. So when we're gathering that information, we try to alert boards to anything that might be a potential red flag in terms of investigating things and finding out background information that may not be public knowledge, particularly not public knowledge at the time that the search is occurring. And so we have adjusted some of our processes over the years to address those kinds of concerns. We have helped boards work through problems and difficulty. Sometimes boards have made decisions that we may not have agreed with, but it's our job to represent the board and to support them in their decision, and so we stand by the board and support them in their effort as they move forward with their decisions. And so if there's specific questions that come up that we want to delve more into, we can certainly do that in terms of any of those searches. I don't generally talk specifically about a district, but I encourage you to call any one of those boards that are referenced in the articles in the Herald and get their insight, because the story in the Herald may not be exactly the board's perception or the full story that got reported. And so we don't try to hide anything in terms of what boards knew, but we let boards speak for themselves. We're not there to speak on their behalf unless they ask us to represent them on an issue. So, but we can try to address those things. So I hope we're within our 20 minutes.
You did just fine. You had 3 extra minutes.
Oh, hey.
Okay, well, good. That means you have more time for questions, because those are really the valuable interactions.
I have a quick question. You Dr. Jerome, you mentioned that there was a commitment to your full attention to the search. I'm assuming that's yourself and Dr. Westrow.
It is, yes, that's correct. We'll give you our full energy, resources, brain power, everything we can summon.
Okay, can I ask another one? To anybody, really, but we talked about, you talked about, and we've, I think collectively here, talked about how important community engagement will be in this process and collecting information from the community in terms of leadership qualities they expect and, what they're looking for out of our next superintendent. How flexible are you in terms of customizing that tool that collects input from our community? Do you have a standard questionnaire that you tend to use and like to use because you can benchmark against it, or are you open to customizing based on our district's needs?
Can I?
Go right ahead.
There's a copy of the survey in your folder that we passed out, so you can see what's typically asked. We do use that as the standard format because we do benchmark, give you information about how your district stacks up against other districts, so you can see how you relate to other districts and where you fit in the general scheme of things. We are willing to customize the survey if that's necessary, but there's usually an additional cost to do that. So to use the survey as it is, there's no additional cost. You can use it and distribute it in as many different kinds of formats. We put it online, we pass it out, there's lots of different ways that we can get that information out. But we're able to customize it, but at a cost.
Okay.
There's another way that might get to your question, and that is in the community forums. That will be something that is not computerized. We'll be listening. And so if there's a question that needs to be asked in that group, we'll listen to their feedback and bring it back to you.
Okay. I've, prior to my current experience, I spent almost 20 years in research, and often we did focus groups prior to doing an online survey because the focus groups could tell us what we might be missing in the survey so we could make sure that the tool we developed was accurate and all-inclusive, and we were going to be able to capture it and then quantify all those things we heard in the qualitative pieces of it.
The other thing, when you talk about community engagement, we certainly reach out in terms of having those kinds of interactions, having the survey online, encouraging people to give us feedback. But there's also some other ways that we have used community groups to help with interviewing processes, that you're getting additional feedback if you want to take that step. That's one of the board's decisions that needs to be made when you do the planning meeting in terms of how do you want to gather that initial input to define the profile, but how do you also want to gather additional input from the community if you want that to be a step in the process? And there's a whole range of options from a completely confidential search to a completely open search in which the community can be engaged in different kinds of ways in an open search, but also using a confidential community committee to give you additional insights into interviewing candidates. And so we can help you with understanding the pros and cons of all of those choices, and then you can make the decision that best fits for Palatine in terms of your outreach.
When you talk about community forums, is there a typical number of people in a forum that would be ideal? What are your thoughts on that? Or do board members take part? Can you give me an idea of what that would be comprised of?
I think the answer is all of the above. We can do small groups or very large groups, town hall type meetings. And it can be open invitation or selected invitations. And you might want to do both of those kinds of things. And I think that there are some typical questions that you would ask, but if there are some specific ones that might be tailored particularly to your school district, we can certainly incorporate those as well.
How much do you think that, if you were to maybe put a percentage on when you're coming up with search criteria or working with us to come up with search criteria, you are engaging with the community, but how much are you engaging with the staff, the current staff in place to kind of understand the issues in detail that the district is facing in some historical perspective?
Often, the way we do that is to have representatives from a wide range of staff members. Teachers would be an example, administrators would be another example, paraprofessional would be another example of people that we might want to meet with to make sure we're hearing what their issues are.
Also, PTAs and students are typically included whenever I've been involved in a search, middle school students typically. And also, we would sit down individually with every board member and hear your concerns, your thoughts, and your perspective.
And then together, the board, to hear each other.
When you ask the question of how do you do that, the typical process is usually a combination of both invited guests and open meetings. And so the invited guests, we have a list of about 25 different stakeholder constituencies. So it might be your union leadership of your various unions. It might be the administrative leadership at both the building level and the district level. It might be general teacher meetings as opposed to just meeting with the head of the union. And so there's a combination of, usually there's 2 or 3 open community forums. Staff members can certainly attend that, but we also usually schedule 2 open staff forums after school that are sometimes more convenient than an evening meeting. And we go through that list of 25, 30 different groups to say, which of these people do you want to invite to a structured meeting that will have an assigned time to say, Jane and Sarah would meet with the union leadership at Tuesday afternoon at 10 a.m., and you would invite the union leadership to bring their representatives to that meeting. So it's usually the staff is as engaged as the community is. And we need your help as a school district identifying the community leaders and staff leaders that we need to reach out to, and probably June's help in some way to figure out the best way to contact those information of sending out letters and setting up a schedule to get that whole setup done. Because usually the associates are in the district for 2 or 3 days, visiting with people throughout the day and the evening, and being at various schools, and try to scatter the meetings around the district so they're relatively convenient for your different communities down in Rolling Meadows or Palatine or Schaumburg, in terms of different communities that people live in.
So with regards to the background check and the due diligence, I know you brought up the District 62 situation, and you mentioned too that there's some points that were omitted from the Daily Herald article. I was kind of wondering, so what would you do differently to prevent a situation like that from happening again? And if there's something else that was omitted that you'd like to just put up for your own, to mitigate the article, you go ahead and give me that too.
There's a couple different versions of what what got reported in District 62, so I'll let you talk to them, but I'll talk to you typically about what happens in the background check process. When we first consider candidates, we typically do an internet search on them to see what we find in terms of background information before we would consider moving anybody further. We also check the provided references and confidential references of their colleagues, of people who may know them that we know, but who they do not list as a reference. And try to do as much assessment of that as possible. Then, once you decide who you're going to interview, boards need to make a choice on when they want to do a third-party background check by an independent agency of all public records, civil, criminal court records, financial records, certification kinds of records. Some boards do that on their sole finalist. Some boards do that on their semi-finalist that they're inviting back to second interviews, because they want to know that before they have those interviews. And all of that information goes back to the board before you would make your selection. If in that whole process any red flags are raised or questions are raised, we share that information with the board. We encourage you, when you check references, because we encourage boards to also call references as they're narrowing down the field. A little bit of it depends on whether it's a confidential search. A little bit of when they do it depends on whether it's a confidential search or a public search, as to when you check those references. But we encourage board members to talk to the board members of that person's previous employer or employers to gather additional information. As a result of the District 62 situation, we are checking into what we can gather by freedom of information requests of personnel records. In Illinois, the only thing you're going to access in a personnel record by state law here is dates of employment and positions held. So you can have a freedom of information request, and it's not going to give you any evaluation information. It's not going to give you any sealed agreements that that board may entered into with that employee. So those are not accessible in Illinois. Some states are now, as a result of some of the changes that have gone on, are starting to make state laws changes in which those agreements will become public documents and will have access to them. So if that becomes the case, we will certainly gather all of that information. But we try to gather all of that and give all of that information to the board so that we can do it first, but the board can do as much due diligence in that regard. How the information in District 62 became public after the fact, I don't know. I don't know how the freedom of information request on that sealed agreement became a public document. That occurred after that individual left that school district, not during the time that that individual. And District 62 did thorough due diligence of talking with former employers and board members in that district before they made their hiring decision. So again, you're dependent to some degree on what people are willing to share with you as you're gathering that information. So, we do as best as we can to try to find out all that information, and state laws may help to make some of that more public, because we do need to know that kind of information if there's something of that kind of nature in somebody's background. And right now, it's not easily accessible.
I would also like to clarify, I was not involved in this search whatsoever as the superintendent at the time, because I was an associate with HYA, and that would have been perceived as a conflict of interest. So I was not involved in that process, just.
And that was a board decision that the District 62 board made. It's typical, boards have different feelings about whether they want their current superintendent involved in the search process. Some do, some don't. It is a board decision that gets made as to how they want to handle that situation. And so that's another one of the decisions that needs to get made at the planning meeting or sometime during the search process.
And one additional piece is the Baker Eubanks piece that you have a brochure in the back of your folder.
That's the third-party background check that I mentioned. It lists all the things that are checked, and it can be done on the sole finalist in LA. When we just finished that, they did it on all 11 candidates that they interviewed.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
So before they interviewed those candidates, they did that third-party background check on all those individuals, so they had that information. So you made that decision as a board as to whether you want to take that step.
There is a cost associated.
There's a cost associated with it, and more importantly, there's a timing piece associated with it. It takes about 10 business days to get that done. So if you wait until you do it on your sole finalist, you have to wait about 2 weeks between selecting that individual and making any kind of announcement, because we recommend that you do not make any kind of announcement until you have a signed contract in hand, a completed third-party background check in hand, and that you've typically done a site visit to that person's place of employment.
Out of curiosity, can you give me a ballpark on what it costs per candidate to do a background check like that? Like, what's the financial ramifications of 1 or 2 candidates versus 10?
$1,000 for the primary pieces of the criminal background check, civil court background. I think it's $1,100 for that piece of it. If you add the social and print media reviews, that's another $1,000 on top of it. So someplace between $1,000 to $2,000 per candidate, depending on what you want to do.
Right.
And that's, just so,
I
some
think you
people
have
have
it in
asked,
this document, too.
some people have asked, is that, going online when you plug in somebody's name to say what's their background? The company that does this actually goes to the courthouses of the person's residence for the last X number of years, depending on how far they feel they need to go back, to check for records in those courthouses. So it's not an online computer search. It's a physical going to the courthouses to check for records on those individuals. And that's why it takes about 10 days to do, because there's a lot of legwork to go to those. People may have had multiple residents in the last 10 years or 15 years.
You've mentioned both open and confidential searches. So obviously, the benefit to an applicant, they would, I'm sure, in many cases prefer the confidential search. How many applicants are you losing by doing a confidential search versus an open search? I mean, will there be a sizable number of people who would not
I don't know if
apply?
it'll be a sizable number. It's a profile of the kind of candidate that you're looking for. So as you define who you're looking for, if you're looking for an experienced superintendent in a similar district who has great reviews and is doing a wonderful job, they're probably really happy in their job right now. And they may not be willing to put their current position at risk to be involved in a public search process. Now, some might. They may, have family in Palatine, and they have always wanted to move back to District 15 to be your next superintendent and be interested, and they're willing to take that risk. But that's the kind of candidate who is more likely to not be willing to go through that process if it's an open search. But we've done many open searches in which, they've found, typically, it would be somebody looking to make a move, looking to change states, or looking to become a superintendent the first time.
Okay, and then how far into the confidential search process would you be comfortable with the board checking references, or would you be calling not voluntary references, but, confidential references or other people that they work with? Or would you not do that in a confidential search?
No, we would.
We would check references, and the board's involvement would be based on what decision you make in terms of, we just would want to be upfront. I typically tell candidates that if you become one of the semifinalists that is invited back for a second interview, you have
That's
to be
fair.
willing to
Okay.
share with your board that the board can call your current board members and ask about your performance in that situation. But that's something to be worked out with candidates.
Okay.
Do you guys feel strongly one way or the other in terms of pros and cons of confidential versus open?
I think a confidential search gives you the broadest pool, but that's also something that you have to make sure your community's comfortable with, because in some places that can be pretty controversial, and people want to be engaged and want to know. So that's going to be something that you have to wrestle with as a board. It's one of the reasons why some boards have selected to use a confidential community committee as kind of a interim step in there, that you ask some community members to assist you in the interviewing process and give you their feedback, but you ask for their commitment to keep those candidates confidential. And, to be quite honest with you, I've used that many, many times in different places, and usually committee members are very true to their word to keep that information confidential. And we have some processes, and we talk with them and some training about how they go about doing that, because a slip of the tongue or, some unintentional comment could cost somebody their job someplace. So committee members usually take it pretty seriously. So that's one of the ways that if boards want to keep a search confidential but engage more community input, that's one of the alternatives to do that. Gives you another set of ears and eyes to listen to that person's feedback. And
kind of narrowing the conversation down, I guess, a little more specific to us here. What do you see as being educators now in this, we'll call it general area geographically? that are pros and cons to filling this position? And what do you see as possible issues that we may not get a good candidate pool with regards to anything that's happened here in the district in the last couple of years?
I think one of the things that you're doing right is starting early. I think that's going to help you. You're going to be really out there first, looking, posting the position, advertising statewide, nationally, and getting your name out there. I think this is a wonderful district that has demonstrated its care of all children. So I think it's going to be an appealing position for people. You are a diverse community, school community, and that will also be appealing to people. And I think that there will be plenty of candidates interested in this community.
I would agree with Sarah. There's not a school district alive without challenges. Depends on the local press, maybe, and how much information is out there. However, I've lived in Schaumburg since 1991 and worked in District 54, and I've always admired this district and thought it was a great district, and I can't imagine that we wouldn't be able to recruit a really excellent pool of candidates.
Could I ask a question or two?
Of course.
So do you know, Hank, if it's legal to actually require applicants to give you access to their personnel file?
It's not legal, but it's not, I don't think it's prohibited to ask. So you could ask that you're asking candidates to share part of their personnel file. When we do an application process, we have a typical application, and we ask for letters of reference and transcripts. But if you wanted to have, some candidates will voluntarily share their evaluations as part of that process. If you wanted to ask that you could see their last 2 evaluations, you could certainly ask that, and a candidate could only decline to, do that, and we'd share that information with you, and you could make a decision if, you still want to see that candidate or you don't want to see that candidate because they decided not to share it. I'm not aware of anything in Illinois that would prohibit you from asking for candidates to voluntarily share that.
It just seems like it might be a way to access some information that's otherwise hidden, and if somebody doesn't give you access, then that maybe is a red flag. But the other question I had was if this board has parameters for its compensation and package, do you ask candidates what their requirements are before they get too far into the interview so that we don't get to the end and their expectations are higher than the board is willing to go, and then we've lost a lot of time and energy?
That's part of the initial conversation that we have with the board to understand what those parameters are. Because when we're recruiting candidates, we certainly don't want to be $100,000 off. That just would waste a lot of people's time. So we need to know what your limits are and what their expectations, the candidates' expectations are.
And would you be able to come into that conversation telling us, in our local area, what our openings are there, what are we looking at in terms of competition from other districts with similar positions?
Yes.
The other thing that we typically do as part of the process is a typical interview process would be to interview 5 or 6 candidates in the first round, narrow that down to, say, 3 candidates you want to bring back for second interviews. Before you would have that second interview, we have a form that we've created that we ask the candidate to give to the board president to say, if you were the successful candidate, what would be your salary and compensation expectations? Because you're asking that then of the candidate when they're one of 3, rather than asking them for compensation information when they know they're the selected candidate. So you'll have some sense of what their expectation would be to accept the job when you're interviewing at that second round of what salary expectations were. And to be honest with you, sometimes even when somebody has been outside of your range, we have sometimes brought a candidate forward to share with the board and say, here's a candidate who's, $25,000 above where your range wanted to be, but they seem to be a great match for you and fit your profile to a T, do you want to see them? If you don't, that's fine, but if you do, you're well aware of the fact that this candidate may be more expensive than some of the other candidates. The other thing in terms of the portal that I just want to mention is Sarah talked about the fact that you can share 5 or 6 of the applications. You can see all the applications if you want to. They're easy to put on the portal if you want to see everybody. Most boards want us to do some sort of sorting, so you don't have to sort through 49-page applications, and typically the way that we sort them are, here are candidates that we think are a really good match to your criteria, and that might be 5 or 6 or 7 of the top candidates. Here are some candidates that match somewhat, but have some questions about whether they're a very good match, and here's some candidates that don't seem to be a match at all. But you can see all those applications on the portal if you want to have all that information provided to you. On our application, we typically ask for current salary information. That's starting to be changed a little bit. Several states have passed laws that it's now illegal to ask that.
Is that right? Interesting.
So-
Isn't that a matter of public record?
Well, in some states it is, in other states it isn't.
Okay.
And so Oregon just passed a law that you cannot ask salary information or factor salary information into your hiring decision. How you do that, I'm not quite sure, but Illinois hasn't passed that law yet, but,
Interesting.
so, but we would gather it for the people you're going to see. We can ask them what their salary expectations would be if they were the successful candidate.
Just 2 real quick questions in regard to costing and pricing on the proposal that we received. In one portion of it, there's I guess a portion that dictates 4 days for what it's called, up to 4 individual consultant days for interviews, focus groups, town hall meetings together, in-person input. What would those 4 days consist of? From a time standpoint, if we want you here for 12 hours, is that 1 day? If we want you here for 1 hour, is that 1 day? I guess because now it's going to be billed off at additional $1,000 a
About
day.
the hourly rate for you, isn't it?
So, I mean, I know it includes for an additional days that we build in there, but is there a hourly, I guess, time frame on there?
Hank?
A typical day for associates when they do leadership profiling, and those 4 days refer to leadership profiling. So it's starting first thing in the morning and going through a community forum. So it's usually like 7 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, depending on what the schedule is. And we say 4 days, but if it takes an additional day to get everybody in, we don't necessarily add an additional fee for that. It's typically within 2 people being here for 2 full days gives you, you can create about 60 or 70 time slots of seeing people throughout those 2 days of
The other
doing
question
interviews.
that I had was with regard to the advertising and putting out, I guess, our information that we're looking for. Is the consulting fee included in the production of that advertising cost, and then we are incurring the actual cost of the advertising? Okay.
I did have one other question, and could you tell us some local superintendents that you've seated that you think were very successful?
Mike Lubefeld in Deerfield. He served there 5 years, and now he is going to North Shore 112. I was on the search team for Barrington when Tom Leonard was hired. Those are 2 very successful superintendents that come to my mind.
I haven't done much in Illinois recently.
I know you went to Arizona, right, or California?
I live in California now, and I tend to do more national searches, but Scott up in Lincolnshire, I did that search when he was hired.
You were on the search in Deerfield, led that search as well.
Helped with it.
And my recent searches include Whitewater, Wisconsin, and the Lake Geneva area.
Anybody else with questions? No? Frank, Dave?
Fine.
Well, thank you for coming tonight, and we have your email information, so if we have other questions, we can certainly email those or call you. And
And our business cards are in the folder, so you can give us a call, or the office can get in touch with me if you have a particular question for me as well. And Max sends his regards. He apologizes for not being able to be here tonight because he'll help oversee the search, but he had another search commitment for a search that he's working on right now, so.
Well, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Delightful to meet you, too.
I wish you all the best.
thanks.
Thanks very much. Thank you for coming.
Actually, boards usually find the whole process a lot of fun. I mean, it's hard work, but it can be a lot of fun to do this. We'd be delighted to do it with you.
Good night.
Good night, nice seeing you.
Thanks.
Could we have a break for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Of course, Mike.
One bottle of water, number 6.
Ah, got it. I'm going to crunch chips. I could appreciate the Daily Herald comments, just saying, that's on the record. Lack of honest reporting and some issues.
Can't imagine that.
A big smile face on. Waiting for the phone call. And I know that there's a lot of effort to honestly report, but you do see things that are skewed, so the idea of picking up the phone and talking to the people involved as opposed to what is online, I think is valuable.
And obviously, they feel they would be vindicated to some extent if we talked to them, or we wouldn't be encouraged to talk to them, I think, so. I'm wondering how, they said they would price match, but they're considerably more expensive. I mean, you think that's a reasonable expectation that they would price match and their price would go down that much?
Can only ask.
Yep, I think.
The price match is always the fine print about, well, it's not similar services.
Right, and that's a really good point to bear back to the session that I sat in. There was a lot of talk about your in-print cost fully loaded versus not fully loaded. Like there's a search firm that puts $12,000 as their starting point, but you pay for everything piecemeal. So by the time you're done, and then do you end up at the same or more than what is initially your most expensive firm? So I think that's something we have to look hard at.
I mean, I like that they have a little bit of a local flavor on the search team. I think that's important. I remember talking at the last convention that there's other people from other board members that you want somebody who kind of doesn't come up with, oh, here's all these great candidates that are just paper great candidates. Like they have a great resume, and they got all the bells and whistles, but don't really understand the community. I mean, that's such a huge part of that role of the superintendent, is just being really aware of all different aspects of the community. That part of it, and that helps when you can always have somebody who's not from the community can acquire that and just be a great personality that can do it. But if you're already, if the search firm has that in their personnel, then that'd be great. So that's a plus for them, in my opinion.
I appreciated that they think that this will not be tough to recruit candidates for, which is fabulous, but I realize they're in a position where they're trying to sell us and woo us something, so they're not about to tell us, here are all the things that are horrific about your district. But I
wish they would
feel
have,
like if they
actually.
had done really good research, they would have come up with a few honest challenges.
Here's the things we'll
I agree.
Right. Here's some of the things we may be looking to overcome, and here's how we might do that, or here's how we might spin that. I'd like to see somebody actually answer that with some honesty. But I know it's difficult when you're in a position of trying to sell your services. You gotta walk that line.
That was like a softball question. The last couple of years, is there anything that might derail them from getting good candidates?
Have you read the Daily Herald in the last couple of years?
No, Mike's question was good. I was just kind of like, the answer just like, yeah, whatever. Like, oh, you're so good. That was basically the answer.
In my opinion, I think to some extent that diversity could be something that scares some candidates away. Like we have such a diverse demographic, geographic district.
Right.
We're not
On its face, the idea of diversity is great.
Right. We're very, very all over the board.
We're diverse in a way that has created some very disparate communities.
And I think that may be something that possibly scares some candidates away.
Right. And if you look specifically at press, some of that diversity is what drives negative press for D15. So it's something that's very real, depending on the group that you're talking to. What do you think?
We haven't really been doing introductions. The board members have nameplates, but Dr. Harry Rossi and Dr. Gary Zabuka are here from School Exec Connect, and they are going to make a little presentation. What we've done tonight, gentlemen, is we've scheduled you for about 20 minutes for your presentation, and we've kind of agreed that we're not going to interrupt during that time, but then there should leave 25 minutes after that for dialogue and questions and things like that. So if that suits you, then you're ready to go.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Well, very good. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for having us representing School Exec Connect for doing a presentation to your board. My name is Gary Zabilka. I'm a partner with the firm School Exec Connect. I've been with them for 6 years. Prior to that role, I was superintendent of schools in Morton Grove, School District 70. I was going to say we're part of the same region. It's not exactly up the road. It's quite a bit of a drive to Morton Grove from here. But I was in Morton Grove for 9 years as superintendent, and then in Downers Grove for 4 years. Prior to that, I spent a good part of my career at Hawthorne School District in Vernon Hills, probably 20 years. So I'm familiar with the area. I actually live in Hawthorne Woods and drive through Palatine and visit Palatine often for a variety of different things. But a little bit more background about myself. I work currently also with the IASA, which is the Superintendent's Association. My role with them is that I have the opportunity to coach and mentor new superintendents and provide professional development for superintendents, primarily across the northeastern part of the state. I also am an adjunct professor for Loyola University, where I teach graduate level classes for superintendents-to-be, primarily principals and central office administrators who are looking to make it to the role of superintendent. The reason why I mention all of those things, not to tell you all the things that I do, but to share with you why I feel that I'm very connected and have a lot of resources and know a lot of people, which is a very important part of this role in trying to find the best possible superintendent for your school district. So that's just a little bit of my background.
Good evening. My name's Harry Rossi. I'm one of the partners in School Exec Connect, one of the founding members of the firm in 2004. Just a little bit about that. 2004, I was recruited by a number of the firms and interviewed and chose to be part of School Exec Connect firm for one major reason, and that is that they talked about every search that everyone does is everyone's search, and there aren't any proprietary searches in our firm. Everyone helps when we find out that we have a particular search. Everyone in our firm has committed that they're going to help whoever are the lead people in doing that search. So it's a really, I was a collaborative superintendent for 18 years in Northbrook Glenview School District 30 and wanted to be part of a firm that believed that was the right way to do business, which is why, I joined the firm when it started. Our founding managing partners had all been members of other firms. So my career, I was teacher, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, and for the last great 18 years of my career, superintendent of schools in Northbrook Glenview School District 30. When I retired, I became a founding member of School Exec Connect. Also, along with Dave Peterson, another retired superintendent, founded FedEd. We lobbied for about 100 school districts, including yours, for about 11 years on federal education issues in Washington, D.C. I gave that up a year and a half ago. So current, and I've also been an adjunct professor at Loyola University for 20 years altogether. Currently, I'm working with the university as the lead in putting together a new state-of-the-art superintendent's program. And to do that, we've recruited Gary as well as many of the great superintendents from around the state to put together a great Loyola program that's going to be initiated in 2019. And believe me, we've done massive research on state-of-the-art of the superintendency, what superintendents need to know these days, and we're going to have a wonderful state-of-the-art program. That's my current project with the university. Additionally, I'm a mentor for first-year administrators through the North Cook Intermediate Service Center. And again, as Gary said, the reason we say this is we want you to know that we're also members of all of the national and state organizations and are active in all of them. We know everybody that everybody else knows, regardless of how many people are on any particular website is doing searches. You can be sure everybody that's on our website actually does searches for us. You can also be sure that we have never brought forward anyone for a superintendent search who has had a questionable background relative to abuse or anything close to abuse. We've also never brought forward anyone who has been dismissed for cause. Among the partners and associates in Illinois, we have never had anyone that we have recommended for a superintendency who has not been offered a second contract. So I think our record in representing you as a board and in doing our due diligence to find out the true facts about candidates and their performance is second to none. And we would look forward to being part of your team to represent you. We talk of ourselves as ambassadors for you, and we will be your ambassadors both with the candidates and with the people in your district with whom we meet in focus groups. One other thing that I would also mention is looking at credentials. Beyond the abuse and other kinds of things, we are doggedly determined to make sure that we bring you people who have legitimate degrees from universities that are truly accredited universities, and you can be sure of that when we bring someone to you. So what I'm going to do, you have all of our information there in front of you, so I'm just going to do a quick overview of our process, which is probably not going to be a great deal different than the other firms. I think the main difference is that we really do take our role as your ambassadors very, very seriously. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the process, and then Gary's going to go over the timeline with you. But what we would like to do almost immediately, if we were fortunate enough to get the search, is to sit down with you and do a planning committee meeting. We consider that to be our most crucial meeting with the Board of Education, to sit down with you while we will have for you all kinds of ideas about advertising and timelines and all of that. This, we really want to be able to do what you want us to do. So we're going to make sure that when we walk out of that planning meeting, that we have everything done the way you want us to represent you. So we will be talking at that point about timelines. We'll be working with you on putting together focus groups that you would like to see us meet with. We will be asking for representation from your district to help us with logistics, both in terms of setting up meetings and also putting together an online survey for you, which we typically do in a district as diverse as yours in more than one language, if that's what the board recommends. We will create our surveys for you in the way that you feel are most important for us to do them, and we'll follow through on making sure that those are done. After we've done all of our focus groups and gotten all of our online surveys and so on, then Gary and I will take all of the input that we have received, and we will put it together in a report to the board. And so you'll have breakdowns by groups, so you'll have an idea of how the groups felt about the most important issues for the district and the most important characteristics that they're looking for in a new superintendent. And in addition to that, what we'll do is we will pick out common threads between and among the groups with whom we're meeting, so that you have an idea of the kinds of characteristics, kinds of issues that seem to keep coming up frequently as we met with your groups. We will talk to you during our planning meeting about this being a confidential search, and we're hoping that that's the way that the Board of Education is going to want to do the search. The reason for that, as you're probably aware, is that one of the things that we're going to do beyond just accepting candidates is we're going to go out and recruit some of the best people from around the country for this great job. And in order to do that, we have to maintain their confidentiality in their districts unless and until they become finalists for the position here in the district. We've done it both ways. We've done open searches and we've done confidential searches. We find that you will get the best candidates if you do a confidential search. We'll use our nationwide network. Even though we are a Midwest firm, we do have contacts all around the country, as every other firm does, and our goal will be to work with you on making sure that at the time that we're bringing candidates to you, and again, Gary will go over that timeline, that we have done our due diligence both in recruiting, accepting, and checking references and doing face-to-face interviews with the people that are the best candidates. For a position like this, we'll probably expect that you'll probably have 40 to 50 applicants. That would be my guess at this point in time. Not all of them will be legitimate candidates. Not all of them will be candidates who are not running from their current positions, and so our job will be to make sure that we don't bring any people to you who are either unqualified or who are not doing very well in their current districts. Once we bring the candidates to you, we'll give you chapter and verse on what our interviews gleaned, what we heard from references. You'll have full paperwork on each and every one of the candidates. And then we'll work with you and bring questions, give you sample questions for your interviews if you would like to use them. And then from that, we would expect that you would be able to narrow the group down to 2, possibly 3 final candidates, at which point you may want to include in your final interviews a stakeholders committee that would be a representation of staff members and community members, not board members, but teachers and administrators and so on, and we would work with you during the planning committee to talk about the composition of that stakeholders group. We will then work with that particular stakeholders group to make sure that they understand that their job, if you choose to have them be a part of it, will be to interview candidates, not to rank them. They will all have to sign confidentiality agreements, and then they will have a form to fill out that will answer some questions about their interviews with the candidates that will come to you before your final interview with the candidates. And I'll let Gary talk to you a little bit more about that in depth as to how that might work. When you get to those final interviews, one of the things that you may want to consider that's becoming more and more common as we're working with boards is to have a presentation by the final candidates to you. Sometimes it's 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending upon what the board is looking for. Sometimes the boards choose to have a certain topic that you would like them to present on. Other times, boards have said, tell the candidates to spend 15 minutes and talk about how they feel they would come into the district, an entry plan, if you will, or variations on either of those themes. But these days, it's becoming more and more common for that to be part of the process, though it's not necessary. Once you have finished your final interviews, if you would like our assistance to help you make the final determination, will be available actually both times as you get from 6 down to 2 or 3, and then if you choose to have us help you to make the final decision, we'll be available to do that. We'll talk to you about contracts and how that's typically done as well, and we'll make sure that we communicate with you all the way. We'll help you prepare news releases if you would like us to do that. We'll help you with your internal and external communication for all of this. And our goal would be to have this done by, at the latest, your January board meeting. So with that, I'm going to let Gary go over timeline and any other thing that I might have missed.
Sure. Well, again, if we're fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work with you, we see that the search would actually open, what we call opening, roughly mid-July to mid-August. What I mean by opening in this regard is that we would have that planning meeting and that we would literally lay out every aspect of the search. All of the things that Harry just mentioned, we'd actually have dates planned for. We ask board members to be sure they have their calendars, because one of the most crucial pieces about this process is having the board members' schedules in sync to be able to host the interviews which occur near the end of the process. The beginning aspects of it, Harry and I are primarily responsible for working with you, of course, but the schedule primarily depends on us. So the opening of the search, like we said, would be roughly mid-July to mid-August. The profile, which again Harry alluded to, is that process by which we engage your community, your staff, and everybody that's involved in Palatine District 15 to weigh in on what they think they would like to see in your next superintendent. You've been fortunate to have had a great superintendent for the last several years. The more we can open this up to other people to get their input as to the things that they'd like to see in Dr. Thompson's replacement, that's what our responsibility is by working with these focus groups. Also, just so that you understand what the focus groups look like, because that could mean different things to different people. We literally will set up meetings, whether it be in schools to meet with staff members, whether it be in the evening to meet with groups of parents. I notice you've got not I noticed, I've known from being in the area, a very diverse community. We may look at having some translators there if we're encouraging people of different languages to come out. It seems like there's a high emphasis in your district, and rightfully so, to really engage all aspects of your community. And those would be things that we would help guide you on as far as how best to reach out to all of your community in ways that they feel that they've had an opportunity to weigh in. So we would host these focus groups. We could be several in number because, again, it's a process by which we want to actually meet with and hear from the various constituents. Again, staff members, parents, community members, administrators, to get their information about what they'd like to see in the next superintendent. That combined with the online survey, and, again, I noticed that you're very amenable to reaching out to your communities. I think you print things in 4 languages currently to try to reach as many people as possible. Well, with your surveys, what we would do is cater those then, working with you to help us translate those. You've got the systems in place to be able to do those, to make sure that we don't leave anybody out of the process, because that's a very important aspect, that people feel like they've had a voice in the process. We take that information then from the online survey as well as from the focus groups. We develop that superintendent's profile, and then we would schedule a meeting with you to present the profile to you here at a board meeting, at an open meeting, very transparent process, where we would share what we've gleaned from the various focus groups and the online survey and show what people are sharing about what they'd like to see in their next superintendent. I'm sorry, I forgot one very important focus group, and that is the board focus group. You as a group, as well as individually, have the opportunity to share what you as board members would like to see, because you are the primary people who obviously are making the decision, and so you are your own focus group as well. In fact, we even ask board members not to be present at the other meetings so that people feel that it's an open room for their group to be able to share what they would like to see in their next superintendent. So again, we share the superintendent's profile. During that same time, we are already beginning to screen candidates. We will have your position posted on our firm's website, which is a highly visible website to those who are in the market for superintendencies. We would talk with you about advertising beyond our website. If you'd like to have this nationally published, which I would imagine to an extent that you would. The cost is minimal. It is an add-on, but it's a minimal cost for the exposure that you get nationally. And as we're starting to get people then applying for this position through our website, we're already screening candidates and looking for potential candidates to interview. So we're developing this pool then roughly between August and November. So it's a good chunk of time, gives us an opportunity to cast a wide net, but to also be extremely selective. As Harry mentioned, we screen very carefully to make sure that we don't bring any candidates to you that you even have to think twice about. So I understand it's probably our time.
You got a few more minutes. Yes, go ahead.
And just to kind of wrap that up, once we have done that part of the process, we present you with a slate of typically around 6 or 7 candidates that have been matched up, paired up with that profile that the board has already seen and approved based on all the input from your constituents. We'll have already vetted those candidates, and then the process then, and this is where the dates are important, is to get the 7 of you together in relatively timely manner. This would occur, unfortunately, during the busiest months of the year for most of us, November and December. You've got III Conference, we've got Thanksgiving, and then you've got the winter holidays that are coming up. But, again, depending upon your schedules, that's the ideal time to actually interview these candidates, okay? And then from there, we work and guide you throughout that process. We go over interviewing protocols with you. We will help facilitate a selection process if you're having a challenging time trying to select between those 7 candidates who you'd like to be your 2 or 3 finalists, we work with you on there. So, as Harry said, we're your ambassadors. We consider ourselves to be part of you and your district. We do everything we can to represent you in the way that you would want to represent yourselves, and we take great pride in that. So, with that, there's the quick overview of our process, both what Harry shared as well as the timeline. Again, the bottom line is we see that, by January at the latest, you should be able to have a candidate, and depending upon how aggressive your schedules were, potentially a little before that. So with that, we're more than glad to entertain any questions that you may have. We've been talking a lot. So.
You kind of led with the assurances around the background vetting.
Yes.
What steps do you take, and what resources do you leverage to ensure that?
Well, first of all, we go well beyond the checking references of people who are listed as references. I think because we have so many contacts around the Midwest and around the country that we can reach out to. First of all, we'll do a person-to-person check with people whom we know and trust about them. We obviously make sure that in whatever state that they're in, that they have been cleared, that they have a clear record, and in their own state are eligible to have a superintendent's license or whatever it's called in their state. And finally, we do background checks that go very deep into personal and professional background, so that there's really no chance that we're going to ever bring anybody to you. I honestly believe we're the only major firm who can make the claim that we do that with such dogged determination that we've never brought a candidate forward where there has been any questionable issues, and we will do, we'll do everything we can once we identify the serious candidates for the position.
Put even simpler, we know people who know people, and those are the people that we reach out to. It's not the people that people would list and or your most common people. And again, we've got a broad network out there that if they're a candidate that's even suitable enough to be considered for you, there's someone out there that we know that knows those people. And we are convinced we've built our firm's reputation on its quality, and as such, people know that we're not messing around and that we're not going to try to sneak anything through with us. And we appreciate that. And Harry's claim of, we're probably the only firm that hasn't had that happen makes us nervous, because all it takes is one. But at the same time, it's, the vigor and, aggressiveness that we put toward that, and the seriousness that we put toward that we're very proud of that.
So you made a comment early on about no proprietary search in the firm, everything is collaborative.
Right.
The two of you would be the key contacts, key personnel for us.
Correct.
How does that collaboration work behind the scenes?
With the other members of our firm. So, first of all, when anyone in our firm gets a search, or any team gets a search, it's reported back to our office, which is now in Minnesota. And then as we're looking for candidates, we send information out to everyone and ask them to, with their contacts, to present to us any candidates, and we'll let them know the kind of district it is. They'll have all the demographics about your district. They'll know, what specifically we have found out through our profile that is going to be needed for the person to be successful here. And then we'll ask all of the members of our firm to identify potentially outstanding candidates for the position.
One of the things that we are fortunate to be able to do is the recruiting aspect is one in which, there may be superintendents out there who aren't even considering looking for another position. And they're very happy and they're very content with where they are. And we've been known to reach out to those candidates, and one of whom is in this room, I don't mind saying. We've reached out before, and fortunately, he has said that he's very happy and content where he is. And that may make some of you happy, some may make some of you sad. But nonetheless, it's one of those situations that, that we will reach out to who we consider to be quality candidates, because they don't all apply, the quality candidates.
Mike? Got a question?
Yeah, I mean, I can ask, I guess, we'll keep on, kind of on the same question that I asked of the last company there, is that, we do have a very diverse and large community here. And so what aspects do you see that would be a detriment to possibly getting a good pool of candidates, and what do you see as being positive about our community that would potentially bring in additional candidates that may not apply somewhere else?
I think, first of all, the diversity these days is a real plus. And, your white population is slightly more than your Hispanic population. And we looked at your demographics. They're really rich demographics with your Asian population and so on. I think that's going to be a real positive. And if there are any candidates who look at the finances of your district, look at the achievement of your district, and again, we always know that things can be better, but believe me, serious candidates are going to be doing their work. These days, so much is online that they'll take a look at your district. They'll see the quality of your staff. You have tremendous resources, 60 administrators altogether, something like that, 2,000 teachers. It's a very rich district in so many ways, located in a great community. I think anybody who sees this position in anything other than a very positive light is someone that we probably wouldn't want to bring forward to you anyhow. I mean, there may be people who are just looking for, 98% a white district, or there may be some candidates who are looking for a completely African-American district, and there are some of those candidates out there. They're not necessarily the people that we're going to be recruiting for your district. Your district's going to attract people who see the size, quality. Your buildings are in great shape, at least looking at them from the outside. There's so many positive things here that it's hard to believe that people looking at this district won't say this is a great job. Now, the only other thing I would say is there may be some people who are looking to find a very small environment. Those people may not be attracted to it. But by and large, really good candidates from around the country are going to look at this district as, a great place, a destination district.
Every district has its challenges. You've got what we consider to be quality challenges. You're looking at kindergarten going from half day to full day. When you've got 1,000 kindergarten kids, that's not an easy decision to make just because of the amount of space that you have, and you have to have someone who's willing to embrace those kinds of challenges and move forward. You've got a strategic planning process in place, and through those things, somebody coming in will see that you're serious about moving the district forward in the right ways, again, engaging your stakeholders and moving them forward, and those are challenges that you're not going to want someone who walks in the door and sees things that are just together, but somebody who's going to roll up their sleeves and say, this is a great place, what we're going to do to make it better. And those are what we envision, those candidates, the kind of candidates that you're going to want to see here in District 15.
So I'm sure that you're both well aware that we've come off a strike earlier this school year. Do you see that as something that is difficult to sell? Give me some input on what you see a potential candidate.
Well, the strike's been settled, and you have a new contract with your teachers. So I think, I'm not saying there aren't some people who might not, who might look at that and say, well, relationships may not be great, But the kind of person you're going to want is going to look at that and say, okay, the district resolved that issue. There is now a contract with the teachers. It's going to be my job, along with the board and, other administrators, to, work with the teachers union and make sure that it doesn't happen again, if it's possible.
Well, and it was big at the time, but, I too, living relatively nearby, it seems like it's quieted down quite a bit since there. Your support staff has, things have moved on. And the fact that you've got, I don't know how many years left to the 10-year contract with the teachers, that's an opposite selling point to the support staff aspect. And, therefore, I think that's something that the person coming in would see as a real positive. Plus the fact that, somebody's coming in, it's fresh ground, fresh territory, and somebody coming in has that kind of perspective until they do something to not warrant that.
Looking at your the client list that you've provided for us, it looks like a vast number of your searches are done in Illinois and the Chicagoland area. At this current time, do you have any searches that are going on that would either help facilitate our search or could be something that is a negative impact to our search? Or based on the kind of the conversations that you've had so far, is that you guys all work well in tandem together? Do you see that as being something that is a positive and negative? Or I guess from an overall broad-reaching standpoint, do you have any searches that are currently going on in the Chicagoland area?
Yeah, Gary and I have already started doing the Wilmette District 39 search. High-quality district, obviously a lot smaller than yours, but that's the search the other search that Gary and I are involved in. They're probably going to be done with their search before you are. There will be, I'm sure there will be some candidates who will apply for both positions, and then it's a matter of our making a determination as to whether or not they're suitable to move forward in one, the other, or both of the searches. But
Also, in complete transparency, I'm also involved in the Libertyville District 70 search. That, too, is a smaller district, one that will, again, the profiles aren't finished. We've had the planning meeting with that board, so they've got their dates out there. But again, when you take a look at a Libertyville type of district that has less than 3,000 students, then your district has probably four times that number. We're looking at potentially very different clienteles, although I'm assured that even with the Wilmette and the Libertyville, we're looking at all great school districts, and I think that only enhance and enrich the pool for you through us. So.
Yeah, it's an open market, so, we will have people who will probably apply for all three of those those positions, and depending upon the timelines and so on. But, you know, we would make a determination as to whether or not, if there's somebody that clearly looks like it would be the right person for your district, then, we will make sure that we make that known to them. But we can't stop people from applying for positions.
If we were to move forward with a confidential search, at what point in the process would you be comfortable with us doing reference checks or speaking to finalists' current board?
Yeah. Usually what the candidates in the confidential searches ask is that doesn't happen until you get down to the final 2 or 3. And before that, it's typically Gary and I who would be doing the reference checks.
Yeah, also with the stakeholder group that we have, and unfortunately, we didn't have the time to really talk about that, but with the stakeholder group, that is a group of, it's called stakeholders, constituents, that also comprise some parents, some community members, some of your staff members, some of your administrators. We encourage the board to have the stakeholder group actually interview the final 2 or 3 candidates, but we have those people who the board designates who will be on that stakeholder committee. We have them sign forms of confidentiality, and again, we've had a high rate of success with that, whereby candidates feel confident meeting with, again, teachers, parents, community members, but because they're signing off on it, they also realize that they run the risk of losing quality candidates if they violate that confidentiality. That works out very well for us. So that's another aspect. Also, just so that you know, that stakeholder group doesn't recommend to the board their selection. All they do is provide the board with input. We make it very clear that it's the board's decision and only the board's decision to select the next candidate. That way you don't run into, well, we actually like this candidate better, but they selected that candidate. That does not happen with our searches.
So you both had long, successful careers before you retired. When you talk about getting stakeholder input, it's a key component. But do you think that the relationship of the superintendent to the board is the most important? That really is the group that's going to be working so closely together, making decisions?
Of course. That's why, the board wants to make sure that they're communicating literally and figuratively, that they want to know what the community, and by community, I mean, everyone from staff members to parents and other members of the community, that their input is important. But when it really comes down to it, that relationship between the superintendent and the board is so key to the success of any district, that it really has to be the Board of Education focusing on what they know about the school district and who the right person might be in order to lead the district forward. But yeah, that is probably the key relationship in any district. If that doesn't work, typically the district doesn't work.
The other thing is the opportunity that people have to weigh in, and they have the opportunity to weigh in. They also have the opportunity not to weigh in. We talk about when we hold these parent meetings, oftentimes there aren't many people that show up, unless, I'm sure you've seen it as board members too. If there's an issue in the district, people will show up. If there aren't significant issues in the district, people may not show up necessarily, but they've had the opportunity. And that's, I think, the important thing from a board standpoint, is to provide that opportunity. They may never get to meet or work with the superintendent that closely, but they've had the opportunity. And we feel that's important.
I want to know a little bit just about, you talked about how, you're working with different schools and, some of the same candidates are going to be maybe potentially applying to 3 different schools. A lot of what you say, a lot of the candidates, you're not just relying on them applying to your website, you're doing active recruiting. How do you navigate recruiting a person? Like if you see somebody who seems to be a better fit for our district or based on the size or something else, how do you guys go about making that delicate conversation?
Based on their background and experience. So, for instance, as far as the recruiting part of it, we would not recruit someone to say, we're recruiting you for, in my case, for instance, I would not tell someone I'm recruiting them for Wilmette and for Palatine. In the recruiting process, if it were someone that we looked at as being appropriate for your district, that's what we would say. We see you as a strong, legitimate candidate for the Palatine 15 superintendency. Now, with that, again, we can't keep them from applying for other jobs, but as far as the recruitment part is, we'll try to recruit people based on the profile that's developed for your district, based on the demographics of your district, and based on what we hear from the board in terms of what you're looking for in your next superintendent. You have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. The focus groups and the profile are significant. After we've met with, let's say, as many as 10 focus groups to get a flavor for your district, it will feel differently than it will for any of those other potential searches, I would have to believe. Because just as you're all different as individuals, so too are districts. They've got certain similarities, but they've got significant differences too. And I think it's our ability to be able to pinpoint what's unique to Palatine to find the best unique candidates for you.
You talked about when and how you approach the compensation expectation topic with the candidates in order to make sure that the pool is viable and yet we're getting what we need as well.
So we typically post it as regionally competitive, which is probably what most of the firms do. And then what we would do is we'd work with the board to get an idea of the range, for instance, that you would be looking for. If you're looking for information about current superintendent salaries, Gary represents IASA and has access to all of that kind of information if you're looking to compare. If you're looking to just say, look, this is Palatine District 15, this is the range that we want you to work within, then we would work within that range. And if there was someone who was slightly above that range, we would come to you and say, this person is a little bit above the range. Do you want to interview the person or not? So we provide that kind of information for you, and ultimately, it's up to the board to make the determination of the range. Sorry.
In looking at your fee structure and costing, under expenses, you have regular expenses. Can you tell me something that might be an irregular expense or something that would not fall into the regular expense category?
Advertising.
Okay.
That's the only extra expense that I can think of beyond what would be within that figure. And just in terms of the advertising, what we recommend to you, even though it's great for the firm to have in Education Week a nice School Exec Connect announces, et cetera, and I used to say that superintendents read Education Week the way sports fans read the Sun-Times from back to front, because the jobs are listed in the back of Education Week. But the truth is, these days, the superintendent that you're going to want is going to look at Education Week online, and the cost to have those ads placed in the paper form of Education Week is so high, and honestly, it benefits the firms more than it benefits anyone else. People who are going to be looking for jobs are going to be looking online at Ed Week. They're going to be looking at IASA. They're going to be looking at the major search firms' websites, and that's where it's going to be. So we'll recommend that the online version of Ed Week.
So typically, what would be the budget, just ballpark for the advertising?
Let's see.
I believe it's $800 for 4 weeks in Ed Week. And then we also suggest another $800 for AASA, which is another national publication. So $1,600 total for 4 weeks in 2 diverse, nationally read journals.
Okay.
Small price to pay in the scheme of things.
Any other questions? Anybody else? Do you have any questions for us?
Just wondering if you have a time, or at least an idea of when you might be making the final decision on firms, or and in the interim, I would just say if you need any additional information from us, we'll be available. But do you have a time?
We are anticipating or hopeful that we will have a decision to vote on for Wednesday's board meeting.
Wednesday's board.
So, and ideally, that's what we get to, but no promises.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having us. We appreciated the conversation as well as the questions that you asked. You've done your homework as well, which we appreciate, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too. Thanks for coming out. I know, I'm surprised my watch hasn't reminded me to stand up.
Thanks, God. Got 10 minutes for a break if anybody needs a break.
Gang's off here.
Very kind. Hi.
Mark Friedman.
Very kind.
Hello, Joe. Lisa Shupai. It's a pleasure to meet you. Joe Porter. Joe Porter. It's great to meet you. Lisa Shupai.
Thank you.
Mark and Barkey.
Hello. It's great to meet you. It's nice to meet you. Lisa Shupai.
A little lower than ever.
Nice to meet you. Hello, it's great to meet you. And I'm
To go low.
nice to meet you.
I'm short to begin with, now I feel like a dwarf.
What do I look like when I sit on that
Person should have stood here. That's okay.
I think the tall people on purpose make sure that
I
those of us that
know,
are
I'm
short
feeling
on the
my
short chair.
Self-concept.
Now we know what kids feel like. We know what kids feel like, but now we really know.
It's just, this is a little on the higher side.
I love tall chairs, so I'm a good chair here.
We'll spin this down for you.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, it's all right.
Well, I told them that you'd be here, and I told them your names, and the structure tonight basically is loosely structured, but we've given you 20 minutes to present, and then left about 25 minutes for dialogue and questions afterwards. So we're just going to turn over to you right now, and it's all yours.
thank you.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. I know you've had 2 presentations prior to us, so please
interrupt us if you find us boring and tell us to move it along, or whatever you need from us. But yeah, additional questions. But really, the simplest and easiest way is to walk you through our PowerPoint, highlight our process. A lot of the processes are a little bit similar, but there are differences, no question about it. 3 different groups of people, 3 different ways of doing things. So tonight, we're going to walk you through what we do. And again, answer your questions, show you we've thought ahead with a tentative type calendar, and to, hopefully make you feel comfortable with a 4-person team, because this is a large district. With 21 schools, there'll be days when we're going to be here doing stakeholder meetings and taking input from folks in the district, and we need to have a few people to be all over the place to saturate your district, so that your stakeholders can't say to you, well, we didn't get a chance to tell anybody anything. So we normally have a 3-person team, but we thought for Palatine size, we have a 4-person team.
And
So-
we've done that before, too, in some larger districts. I think it works well for us.
Absolutely, and we'll start by quickly introducing ourselves, and then we're going to walk you through the PowerPoint. We don't want to waste our 20 minutes on ourselves.
All right, I'm going to go quick, but I'm Ann Noland, obviously. We all just shook hands. I'm a retired superintendent. I've been retired for a number of years and joined BWP in 2005, and have been a partner with them, I think, for the last 5 years. And during that time, I've done a lot of searches, and I've done a lot of searches in a variety of districts, some very small ones, some very large ones, some very diverse ones, high school districts, elementary districts, in-state and out-of-state. So I think my total now of superintendent alone is about up to 60, and then we've also done some assistants and principals and, those kinds of things. So I think what I bring tonight is just a lot of good experience in working with a variety of districts. Mark?
Okay, Mark Friedman, I'm the president of BWP and Associates, as one of the founding members. Our company has associates all over the metropolitan Chicago area, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I'm retired as a superintendent in Libertyville. I was there for 17 years, and post-retirement, did interim superintendent roles in Winnetka, in District 59 in Elk Grove and Arlington, and also Niles Township High Schools, Niles North and Niles West. So I've continued my career post-formal retirement. Good time at each of those. I'll also admit to being the person that hired Scott in his first teaching job and brought him into the profession. I don't look that much older than you, but I am. I
don't know if that's a reflection on you or me.
I don't know what to take the
So I thought I'd get that out. We want to start off with a little bit of a laugh. And so I've probably done 100-plus searches over the years in mainly this area, but a few out of state also.
Good evening, I'm Phil Earhart. I'm the one working superintendent at this time. I'm currently a superintendent in the far west side of Page County, Benjamin District 25. Previous to that, I've worked in a suburban school district in Cincinnati, which was about 17,000 students, so I understand the scope. And before that, worked as superintendent in a suburban district outside of Indianapolis with about 15,000 students. So I totally understand the scope and also the diversity that you have as well, which I see as a real strength.
I'm Joe Porto. I'm also a retired superintendent. I retired in 2011 after a 35-year career. The last 10 years of my career, I was superintendent in Avoca, which is a district in Wilmette, and the kids feed into New Trier High School. Since retirement, I have joined BWP and started doing searches. I also have my own consulting business, and I specialize in strategic plans and helping districts facilitate those. Also, I do a lot of coaching of administrators and working with school boards. Also, just a little note, that 35-year career I mentioned, mentioned, started right here in Palatine, District 15. I was a 5th grade teacher at Virginia Lake School. The kids that I taught went here to Sundling, and I was telling these guys when I walked in, it just brought back lots of memories. We used to have our institute days and such here. So it's kind of neat to go full circle and be back here. I also live in the area right next door in Arlington Heights, so I'm very familiar with the northwest suburbs.
Yeah, and I'm in Buffalo Grove. We're very close. The nice part about it is for little things like picking up a group, meeting with a group in the evening or an after school, we're very close by, very easy to do. So, and we actually know the area pretty well. I'd have to say that's an advantage. We've been very busy this past year and doing a lot of work in the south suburbs. It had to really learn some of those communities, Flossmoor, Homewood, Flossmoor, and Chicago Heights, all those areas. So this is familiar territory, so hopefully we'll be able to stay and work with you. Now, we'd like to walk you through our PowerPoint presentation. And the first page is BWP and Associates LLC is the heading. And that's just a little background about our firm. The original name was the Bickert Group. We really had pretty much all of the search business in the Chicago metropolitan area. And then there was a split, and several companies were birthed from the Bickert Group. And so we formed BWP and Associates in 2006 and merged 4 other national firms together. So we bring a strong local presence, but we also bring a national presence. And I think that's kind of important in a large district where sometimes you do need to reach out beyond this area to find quality candidates. Who are we? On the next page, 9 partners, 50 associates. That's grown actually a little bit larger. And we have representatives in Illinois, Texas, Washington, Tennessee, all over. So as you can see, we're well represented by all these acronyms for professional associations. We won't give you a test or expect you to know what they all are, but we are all involved with these organizations. And then that helps us in the recruitment process in identifying good candidates and potential candidates. So we use that a lot.
The next page starts to describe the process that we use, and I'm going to go through the first couple of pages of the process quickly with you so that you can become familiar with that. But if we're lucky enough to be selected as your search firm, the first thing we're going to want to do is come in and conduct a planning meeting with the full board, and we do this at your regular monthly board meeting or a special board meeting, but it's all open session. And we think that's important to emphasize that we're doing this with the cameras rolling, if that's what you do, or with an audience, or with the press, or whomever, because we think it's important that for the first few stages of the search, that everyone in the community knows exactly what you're doing, and that is aware of it, and then you can answer questions to them as well. So we come in and we do a planning meeting with you, establishing timelines and calendars and parameters for the search, customizing where you want the search customized, and we'll get to that more a little bit later. Once we've got the search planned with you and you've approved a calendar, then basically we're ready to go. And that's as much as it takes. The planning meeting sets everything, and then we're ready to go. And at that point, then we launch our search and begin to launch our recruitment. Some of the recruitment we'll talk about a little bit later on once we've done the audit, but at this point we're throwing out we're getting our ads out, we're getting our website set up, we're linking to your website, we're opening up the applications, and we're tapping on some shoulders of people we think, may be interested in. Some people are calling us at that point too, saying, hey, what do you know? What do you think about me for that position? So that's kind of number 2 there. And then we really, once school starts, we can, we'll probably do this. Marcus had a timeline for you a little bit later, but those are preliminary steps. Once your school's underway, one of the most important things that we do is come and get to know more about the district and conduct an audit of the district. And that's why with it's the 4 of us, and these are the same people that would be in your district conducting the audit. We'll meet with as many groups as you identify for us to meet with. Typically, of course, we meet with teachers, administrators, parents, PTO or PTA, whatever you have in your district, Community members, again, those are groups that you might identify for us, and that varies a little bit from community to community. And we launch a survey. We hold at least one public meeting. And if you didn't get a special invite, there's still a chance for you to come and talk with us. And then another key is that we talk to each of you individually. We'll sit down for about a half hour or so and talk with each of you individually. Real simple questions we ask. Everybody gets the same questions, but they really do help us and guide the rest of the search. So that's kind of the first page.
By the way, should you select to go that route, an open search, there are districts, and we don't want to presuppose anything, there are districts that say we don't want to do that. We want you to just establish a pool, and then we'll interview them. So you have to know there is no absolute here.
Right. There are other ways to conduct a search. I'm describing kind of a typical one, particularly for things that are starting in the fall and following a retirement and a successful superintendent. But those are kinds of things that we can answer for you later on or in the planning session as well. The next page kind of gets a little deeper into the process. Once we have conducted the audit, we then prepare for you a report back about that. And that's what we call our leadership profile. And that's where we try to narrow down the things that we've heard from all the groups and all the people that I just explained to come up with some common traits that everyone is telling you that we ought to look for. And then we also give you the results of our survey, which is very quantitative. It is what it is. We're just going to give you that. We'll probably post it in 2 languages and combine those for you for your final report. So that is just what it is. And then we begin some more specific recruiting, looking at some of the characteristics that you've asked for and can more specifically recruit or answer questions to candidates, and candidates can respond to the big question we get is, what are they looking for? Now we know, so we can give them that kind of information. So that gets us through the recruiting and then moving down to the screening. So what we do then with that pool of candidates who have come in through recruiting and through the application process and the advertising process, then the 4 of us sit down and decide to talk with about 10 or 12 of those people face to face, if at all possible. Sometimes we Skype if they're out of state, but our goal is face to face. Then we narrow that down to the group we think most meets your profile. There'll be a lot of good people, but we're looking for the group that is going to be the right ones for your profile. And then we're going to come back and talk to you about those people. This is the first time we need to be in closed session with you, and so we'll present then through our whole process the people we think are best meet your needs. And Phil, I think, is going to pick me up from there and talk to you about what happens once we're in closed session with you.
So once we're in closed session, as Ann said, we'll go over all the candidates and give you documentation on that so you know the candidates from that. At that point, then, we'll also conduct a workshop on that same evening on the interviewing process. What are the interviewing questions? We have a whole bank of those, a menu, so to speak. You can choose from those, or if you'd like to create your own. We also will do some brief training on what questions you cannot ask, because as you know, there are some that are the no-no questions that won't be there as well. And then probably the most important thing we do in addition to those first 2 things is work with you on coming up with a consensus process to use. And that's one where the board sometimes will seem to struggle with that, but we've done this many, many times and think we can give you some models to look at that really help you come with a consensus that all parties can agree upon, which you know is so critical as we move on from that. The next step is then you would then interview the finalists for that. We would set up all the interviews for you, the location, that's all done ahead of time. Based on your calendars, we would identify the time and the place for that. We would also help you create a tool that goes back to the profile that you talked about that'll help you keep track of each candidate and do some type of a rating system. And we'll give you an example, but you can use another rating methodology if that works best for you as well with that. The next section would then be to go to employing the new superintendent. We're with you all along the process with this. We'll talk with the board president and whoever the contact person would be about contract discussions, a transition plan, because that's very important to have that transition to go very smoothly with that, and to also how you're going to make a presentation to the public, to the staff, to the media. We'll even help you write your press release if you'd like us to do that as well. And later on, you'll see in a few minutes another unique feature that sets us apart. We do a very strong process of mentoring. I think Joe mentioned that a minute ago, but we really pride ourselves on that. I have candidates, I'm in their 4th year now as superintendent. I still meet with them and mentor, and I learn a lot from them too, but it's really a way to really keep in touch with them to make sure things are going smoothly for them and answer any questions that they might have as too.
I just called one of the people as an example that I just called on the way here, one of the people we worked with last year, and he was at graduation, so he's made it through the year, but I mean, we've talked several times during the year, but that's kind of our style. We like to follow up with anybody that we place to make sure they have a good year.
We don't just walk away, I think,
No,
is
I think
the
that's
key,
right.
that we're here to support you as a board, as well as the newly placed superintendent.
So we've outlined the process to you. Do you have any questions regarding the process?
I want to, before you, if you don't mind, I want to say I skipped over one of the real important parts on my presentation, was that before we present you with candidates, we also do a lot of checking on those candidates and Googling and calling people we know. And we think that's one of our strengths too. Between the 4 of us, we know a lot of people. So not only do we call their reference list, but we try to call some other people that we know too, just to say, hey, can you help us out here? What do you think about the match? And those kind of things. So by the time we're in closed session with you, we have done quite a bit of background checking. You're going to do the fingerprinting at your own, and once you hire somebody, the criminal background checking, but we've done the reference checking for you at that point.
And during that time, we give you full disclosure. We
Right.
tell you
We do
anything we
tell you.
know. We don't try to color it. We tell you
No.
exactly. Because a lot of times, there's a good story behind whatever that position might be for that individual with that. So the next phase would then be our track record. So how have we been doing? And Joe's going to walk you through that.
Okay. Well, I think we have such a positive track record because some of the things that were talked about in the process, I think we do really well. Ann mentioned that audit, and it's such a key part of the process because that is when we get to create a clear profile of the candidate. And we use that profile for everything. We develop our questions, our screening questions around that profile. We create our way we're going to judge and rate the candidates around that. When we help you with developing your questions, we've got that profile in front of us. And when we talk to you a little bit about how to reach consensus, again, that comes up. And so that is just a really key to the success. So our track record is something to be proud of. The vast majority of our candidates that we place, they get through their first contract. Most of them are offered successor contracts, and we've never had anybody, found to be negligent or criminal or anything. And there has been some bad press about this process that you may have seen in the Daily Herald and some other things, but you've never seen BWP attached to any of those. We do a very, very careful job. I was looking for some wood.
I know, right? Superstitious here.
And then a couple guarantees we'll give you throughout the process. Number 1, we'll be on call. You have anything on your mind, you give us a call. We're there. We don't just get you started and then walk away. We're there every bit of it. Phil talked about it, everyone's talked about it, but this is a BWP exclusive, this mentoring. We take it very seriously. We also think that that is another connection to our strong track record. We don't just place a candidate, accept your check and move on to our next search. We're really invested in their success. If for some reason, it's very, very rare, it's hard to even find an example, but if a candidate does not complete 2 full years in the position and you have to make a change, we'll come back and do another search for you at no charge except some maybe minor expenses. And the other thing we don't do is we don't play around with candidates that we place, and then they're working in your district for a year or two, and then we're doing another search, and, ooh, you know, maybe they'd be better. We don't do that. We won't slate previously slated candidates, at least until somebody's through their first initial
And we don't ever, I mean, we hope they stay
We just-
for you and retire, but we definitely guarantee it for the first part.
And if you're a numbers person, that number of successful searches is somewhere between 95 and 100%. You hate to put a quantifier to it because these are people. So it's easier to talk in the generality than an exact number. But if you are one that looks at that, it would be between 95 and 100%.
I agree.
Mark, you're probably going to take them through the fun stuff.
Again, several things entered into our thinking. We gave you a very reasonable fee quote. Our expenses are minimal. It's not going to be add these up and then come back to you a week later and ask for $10,000 more in expenses. We won't do that. What we say we're going to do, we will produce a candidate for that amount of money. So our ranges are very small. Reimbursable consultant expenses,
That's just our
$800 to
travel.
$1,200. That's just how much we have to put into it. We use a hotel for our final interviews to isolate candidates. We don't want them coming into a public place, so others may run into them and see who's coming. So we have this deal in Schaumburg, and it's $160. So those go into those totals, but truly, that's about what you're going to see. You won't get any surprises from us. If there is a surprise, we'll eat it, because we stand by our word.
We really try to, we do, you know, obviously, anybody some expenses in the work, but our goal is to minimize any additional, I mean, we were all superintendents, we know people look at those bills, and we appreciate that, and that's our philosophy as well.
It's easy for us to do our job when we know we stay within a perimeter. It's as simple as that. And the advertisement costs today are very low. 10 years ago, there used to be paper ads in a journal called Education Week, where there was pages and pages of vacancy announcements. We don't see that anymore. We do everything basically online. So it may cost us $400 or $500 to post an online posting, maybe a second one for that amount, but that's it. There's no thousands of dollars of print advertising, unless you said, hey, we want our name in lights, take out a full-page
And we do have
ad.
some districts who say that for various reasons. I think particularly some of the larger high school districts we've worked with, because they're looking kind of for a little different crowd of people, and we've recommended some in those situations, and we've seen some payoffs. But those are things that we would talk to you about at the planning meeting, and there's several economical ways to go and still get some national presence with your advertising that we would recommend or talk with you about if that's the direction you feel like you want to go. Other than that, we use the Illinois Job Bank and free sites, and our site's complimentary to you. We work with Illinois ASCD. They list everything for us free. So we're pretty creative in some of the ways we get the word out.
Yeah, we have a lot of relationships with organizations.
And mainly it's
that do
word of
things for
mouth.
us.
We talk to people.
Yeah.
Scott knows that.
The next page is titled Why BWP, and I'd like to add a 1A, and that would be all that we do and all these promises we do within our minds your student population and your staff, that they are who we're all working for. So, you know, the number of children that permeate all your schools, that's really what our target is. And the staff that services those children, support as well as certified, those are our targets. And those are the people that we're really hiring a superintendent for. We're all part of the adult governance piece, but the day-to-day stuff, that's why it's so critical to have a person who can be comfortable on a day-to-day basis in a school, interacting with children, interacting with staff, interacting with the bus drivers, interacting with everybody.
'Cause that's
And
what the
we
job
make
is.
that a number one priority for us.
And that's, if we're lucky enough to be back, when we come back to you in closed session and do our training, we're going to really hit that hard with you, too. In the back of your mind, keep your kids and your staff and your parents in mind. That's who you're here to find a new superintendent for. That's real important to us.
So we're just going to highlight a couple of things.
Yeah.
Our unmatched record of success, we'll stand by that. We urge you to call references. We urge you to talk to people right next door. Arlington Heights 25, Wheeling 21. Who else was right next door? We did, we're very active in the area, and we know we have very happy school boards because the superintendents have a lot of longevity there. Wheeling, we just placed someone, and we're going to share their calendar with you in a minute. Our references, truly will stand by them anytime. Extensive recruiting resources to provide you the best candidates.
We customize our searches to meet your needs.
Well, we have a comprehensive professional network, so that means not only locally are we all active, but regionally and nationally. We know that there is not a large interest from people out of state coming to Illinois. We know that, but there may be one person that does make that move. Here's an example right there. And you never know, you don't want to leave anybody out. So we do use that national network that we have. And then our searches are not fill in the blank. Our searches are, let's work together. That's why we talk about a planning meeting, and we customize it for you. So we don't have a blank slate and we'll just change the name from Wheeling to Palatine, to Hawthorne or to some other place. No, we really want to make sure we get your needs covered in this customization process. Our committed, intelligent consultant, that's us, I guess.
That's very important.
Well, that part, I didn't write that, right? Again, our references are focused on and track record of success, and we know the area, and we are diverse.
We're very diverse.
Our organization is very diverse. We are active in communities with all types of student population, all kinds of communities with demographics in many different ways. And we're comfortable in a diverse environment. And I think our track record shows just this past year where we've been in many communities where there's been a lot of diversity in the student population.
We enjoyed that, really. Very much.
Did I miss
Anything
anything,
else?
guys?
No, it's good.
What we'd like to then just call your attention to and then turn it loose to you, like I said, we thought we were trying to think a little bit ahead, and in your packet, we gave you a copy of the calendar we worked out in Wheeling, and we're not saying we're going to duplicate that. We wanted you to see the steps, and it just so happens that their timeline is almost exactly the same as yours. And so little bitty things, step by step. Some of these things we would recommend you do, some we wouldn't. We may do a couple of other things. But they started out in August, and their tentative calendar called for their 12, 14, 17 Board of Education meeting to announce and hire, and they did. They came right on time with that. And so it's just something for you to visualize your time, the things that would take your time, like the night meetings that you'll have to have for interviews, the night meetings you'll have, for finalists and interviews, the opportunities that you'll have for meeting one-on-one with us or through phone calls. We're doing a lot of phone interviews now with board members who are very busy.
Especially those who are
We're fine with that. We're okay with that. But it's just something so you can see, spread out, here's what our search is probably going to look like. So we just wanted you to have that. You can scratch off District 21, but I didn't want to give something out from another district without acknowledging it.
So what questions would you have for us?
Fire away.
I have a question about the audit process. So we are in a community where community engagement is incredibly important. It's incredibly important to all of us. Most of us are brand-new board members. We have one board member who's been on the board for 2 years. Everybody else was elected last year.
Oh, my gosh, yeah, great.
So a very new board, and many of us ran sort of on this idea of community engagement. So it's important to us in the audit process. It's important to us in the interview process. In terms of, you mentioned briefly doing an online interview. Who do you anticipate opening that up to, and how do you anticipate creating that online survey? Do you have one that you use standardly, or is there some customization opportunity?
Sure, glad to. With the survey, typically we do that in English, and then we do it in Spanish, but we can do it in other languages if you deem appropriate for that. We do have the template, but we've had districts recently that we've done where we've changed some of the items on there. As Ann referenced, those are very quantitative. So we had X hundred people filled it out. Here are their responses to that, and then we'll go through and present that as part of the profile. Post it on your website as well, because that's important to do for the transparency, so they can see the themes that start to emerge from that as well. So that's a real critical one. The other thing we'll do is work with your communications director or your public relations person to really set up who do they want to interview, when, where, because that person, along with Dr. Thompson, knows the community well and what we need to do in order to get that done. And the board will give us some ideas on that as well.
The survey is great data, but the focus groups are where I think we really can dig and probe. And this is a big district, so we'd have to work with you. How many forums would you want? Would you want to use your 4 middle schools as the center for those, or get them out to the elementary schools? That would all be up to you. But the survey gives everybody a chance, but those focus groups are where we really enjoy the one-on-one interaction.
The survey goes out to everybody in your community. I think that's part of your question, too. Not just your teachers and your parents, but we'll work again with your communications department to get that notice out. It'll be on your website, but anybody in your community can go to your website and take it, and we'll leave it up for a couple weekends, so they can do that. And we will, and there's an area like most surveys where they check who they are, community member, parent, those kinds of things. So you'll have that feedback, too, as to who took your survey. But anybody, kids can take it, too.
Who, typically when you're recommending focus groups, what type of people, or what would be the diversity of representation in those focus groups as far as people goes?
Typically, we work with the district, we work with the board. The board members, obviously, and we'll do them individually. The administrative team, so central office administration. You have a large central office administration, may need to be broken into a couple of groups. That's why we brought a larger team, because we think there's a lot of legwork here. Teacher leaders.
Building administrators.
The leadership of the PTOs or PTAs. So it'd be very difficult to get everybody. So maybe just the president. Do you have a president's council? Some of these groups are already in place, and we just come to their meeting, and we make it easy for them. And so at times, you reach out and do the open forums. You do as many as you think you have to. The tenets of those things, we're not seeing a lot since we came into the survey model. Yeah, we offer them. The survey gives people the comfort of their home and their desktop, and they can just take that survey.
Have you found manners? One of the things we struggle with is getting involvement of community members in general that are not necessarily associated with the schools. They don't have students in the schools. They're taxpayers, but they're not immediately attached. Do you have any ways of? This is the world's hardest question, right?
We've worked with the public relations officers in school districts to attack those groups, find out.
Also work with the Chamber of Commerce, too, or something, reach out to the governmental agencies. And
Youth serving agencies would be another group we'd look at. We try to get a lot of publicity out because, about 2/3 of the stakeholders don't have kids in school anymore, so how do you get from them? Some of they have to do by the good old-fashioned way of print in newspapers, newsletters from different organizations too. The better we can get the word out, the better off we'll be with that.
Right.
Is there a senior organization or something in the community? I mean, again, those are things down the road we can talk to you about. Whatever is important to you, we'll find a way to reach out to them.
And I think it would be helpful to have a general list or of ideas from you guys, and then we could plug in answers to it.
Yeah. And that's your,
Planning.
your communications department person. We always work tightly with those folks.
And we'll go to them too. There's a senior citizens group that has a agency where they work through. We'll be happy to go there as well.
Okay.
We're pretty flexible on, we try pretty hard to get people involved.
What other questions would you have?
Make it easy on us.
I have a question. So we hear all the time, we started out the presentation talking about 17 years of superintendentship in one district. And we hear all the time about superintendents that do 5 years, one term, and then they're out. I'm not in education. I don't know why that happens. Can you give me an idea of why, and then what potentially you could do to mitigate that level of turnover? Because for me, stability, long-term stability is really important when you're dealing with complexity, and this is a very complex district.
That's a great question.
You're on, what, 12 years?
Yes. Part of that, I think, goes back, and Joe mentioned before, the profile, of making sure that we really have made a good match with that. The second one, too, is we have a very frank conversation with the candidates on why do you want to come here. Now, this really doesn't apply to your district because you're the third largest elementary district in the state. You're in the major leagues at the top of the standings. But in some places might be, well, it's a stepping stone, I want to do something like that. So we really look at also them answering the question, what are my career goals? And that's a very critical one, which gives us an idea if they're going to fit that profile that we've put together for that as well. I think another key one is last evening I viewed your board meeting that you had recently, your reorganization meeting. Candidates go out and do their homework as well, and they see how well you all work together in those meetings. Speaks volumes when you have people who are going to be attracted to coming here rather than there were 4 people running for president and, there's a lot of gerrymandering going on and all that. Was very professional, very well done. That speaks volumes when we get candidates in here as well.
The other thing we'll recommend that for you, and we'll talk again later about this, is we highly recommend that once you have a new superintendent on board, that you hold a retreat and choreograph the first year, revisit some of your board protocols, maybe tweak those a bit with your new person, with both groups working together. We can orchestrate that, or you can use the School Board Association. We don't care so much who you do that with, but we think it's another way to set up the success of the board and the superintendent, and by doing that, you're setting up the success of the whole district, which gets down to the kids, is what, like Mark said, that's what we're all after too. But those are some of the things that we recommend. And the other thing I can't emphasize enough what Joe said a while ago. We're on call. And that doesn't just mean we check in with the superintendent, but the board presidents that we worked with last year, we've touched base with 2 to 3 times during this school year, or we've seen them at III, or and I usually call them or email them, but we all do that in our own way. Because we want, if there's something that during the first year or so that we can help, we want to do that for you, because we're exactly the same thing you're looking for. We think it's good for kids if you have a superintendent who is long-term, working well with, because it takes a while to get to know the community, and for the community to trust you, and that's what it's all about.
Stability on the part of the board is important for longevity.
It is too,
And, in my district, where I stayed 17 years, I had very little turnover. Some people were on for 2, 3, 4 terms. Now, that was something that they liked and wanted to do. But the shortening of tenure for superintendents is somewhat indirectly responsible as a result of, actually, of every 2 years, the election cycle. And as people cycle on and off, they don't have the allegiance to the person that's in the seat as the same people who hired that person. So that plays a little bit of a role, and it's really hard to orchestrate that over again. But if you as a group, all newly seated, are committed to staying on and hire a person, I think that will give that message to candidates that, hey, I'm going to go that this board's going to stay in place. As Phil said, they get along well. Things are moving along in a positive way. This is a great destination.
So you all have to commit to 2 terms now. Even though you're just on the board.
Sign on the dotted line.
I think the other factor which we've alluded to but really haven't said is having Dr. Thompson on for this amount of time. It's like, this is a place to stay. And put your roots in there.
Yeah.
Versus if you had a revolving door going on.
It's hard to recruit.
That's a totally different.
District with that kind of track record.
Right.
Which makes sense. We'd be talking to a little bit different attack strategy. If this were a rotating superintendency every 2 years, somebody new, 3, we'd have to strategize on how to stabilize the reputation. Reputation is strong.
Absolutely.
That would be a problem for us. Good question.
Do you sense that there's any issues or aspects of the district that would present challenges to our ability to find good candidates?
The only thing, and I have to be truthful and honest, is the applicant pool is tight. It's not like 5-10 years ago you had 50, 60 applicants. This district, I'm going to predict 40 to 50 candidates. So on the high end, many that we've done recently are in the 30s. And this district has a lot of attractive pieces, the size, the staff, the support staff, the diversity, plus, the district's financially sound. There's good people who have good reputations doing the day-to-day. And now that you can all pat yourself on the back as being a model board because you made it through your first year. It's your second year, right? Yeah, this is going to be your second year. These are all the good things that people look for. So I'd say numbers, we don't worry about numbers. Quality.
Just have to get the right person.
We want to make sure that we have quality folks. There's somebody who's in a quality big district that called me and said, are you folks interviewing in Palatine? And I said, yeah, how'd you know? I thought it was kind of between all of us. He said, no, well, I kind of know. And he's an active superintendent. He said, it's the only job I might be interested in. And I'm not making this up, and I'd even tell Scott who the person is on the side. But the fact is, I didn't expect that person to demonstrate an interest. So this is sort of like a niche job. It's not like every person who wants to be superintendent is looking to come to Palatine. I think it's too much for some. And so experienced people who understand the dynamics of a large district, a diverse district, a community that has wealth and has poverty, all of those things together, that's the type of person. So it won't be 100 candidates, but we don't need 100. We need 1. And I think we can produce that. So did I get that for you?
I think, too, as Mark alluded to before, not just for Palatine, but the number of candidates coming from out of state has decreased dramatically for a number of reasons. So that's another issue that...
Don't forget now, anybody that comes from out of state is going to be a Tier 3 employee for pension purposes. And we haven't seen what those look like yet, but it's not attractive, especially when they start talking to current other seated superintendents and hear the differences. Word gets out. So we see very few out-of-state, legitimate out-of-state folks.
There's some people who apply for everything. But we know-
running from something or an issue happened or
We'll
something
get-
like
We'll
that.
probably have the majority of our candidates from Illinois, and then there'll be some from Wisconsin, Indiana, I mean, the states that we touch. And sometimes people started in Illinois a few years ago, and guess what? They're Tier 1, so they can come back and.
Yeah, there
you know,
are those folks, yeah.
Maybe their family here, and now it's time for
Exactly,
them to come back and settle in a little bit. So those are the kinds of people who will get a call from about coming back to Illinois because it looks attractive to them. And this would be a good district because if they have some experience, they come back to a larger, stable district. So we're excited. We think it'll be good candidates. And to get to the bottom of your question.
Kind of building off that, should we not like the pool of candidates that you bring to us, will you continue to look at no additional cost other than actual
Yeah.
expenses?
Yes.
We don't put that in the guarantees because we haven't had to do that. But at times, we ourselves aren't happy with the candidate pool, and we'll stretch it out a little bit.
You had one.
We've had one where
had one.
we went
Phil and I.
in and did another year after that even. There was no cost to them. And we found a really good candidate.
Yeah,
but-
and he's been there ever since, so.
Yeah, that's been
Small
5 years.
Five
State
years
district,
now.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we're not done till you're done.
Yeah, if you think your district, this size, will attract a 40, 50 candidate pool, hopefully, the districts that we do mid-state, downstate, they get a
Smaller pools.
dozen candidates.
Yeah.
At that, 15, if they're lucky. So it's really stretched thin right now.
There's still good ones in those pools, but we don't have the really deep pools that we used to have for some of the smaller districts that are down a little farther away. I don't like to use that word downstate because I'm from central Illinois and it's in the middle of the state. So I'm a little careful.
Whatever.
Anything south of
I-80 is downstate. Okay, we put up with her, but that's...
I have to keep them honest.
Actually, there's only 2 city boys here.
Anything else?
Barb, Dave, Frank?
Get a chance when you have to look at your tasks at hand, regardless us or anybody else. This is how you're going to be busy, or will be busy. There's a lot of things to do in a search, but you have plenty of time. You know,
Good shape.
you're out there early. You don't really have competition. There are no other Palatines. There's other searches, but they're not Palatine. They'll attract a different kind of a person.
So that said, I just have a curiosity. So if you've watched the press and paid attention to what's been going on in Palatine since this board was seated, we had a strike in the last year. What do you anticipate the repercussions of that would be in terms of candidate pool?
Nothing. It's over and done with. That's
Yeah.
if anybody asks us if it's once we say it's.
You know, unless people are walking through the hall, you know, stabbing each other, I think, you know, the strike is over. People hopefully our adults get back to work. And I've asked Scott about that. He said, you know, we're back to normal. And people know these things happen. It doesn't scare somebody away. And you have the comfort of long-term contracts for some of your employee groups. You have a good financial plan, so the district isn't selling tax anticipation warrants, you're not in debt. Those are the things that people look for. So a candidate's going to come in and look at your financial status, and they're going to want to know, hey, am I going to have to get out and do a referendum in 2 years, and all that, and they won't have to do that. So they could actually concentrate on, one, getting to know people, and you know the students and the staff, as well as work with you. That's the number one priority. And then after that, being out in the community, having a presence. There's a lot of public relations that the superintendent in a large district like this has to play on a daily basis. And so those are the things that they would pick up right away and get involved in. And those are the things that you would see first in the person that you're going to be looking for.
When we get inquiries from candidates about, you know, well, what do you think? The number one thing on their mind, they almost always ask first, how's the board? How's the board?
Well, you can say we're awesome.
Because we are.
You are.
Nice.
And that is going to be a very strong selling
Then they
point,
ask
because
us how
that's the
long-
number one question.
How long the
How
superintendent's
long?
been here,
Right.
and why is he leaving? And that's, all those are
Yep.
good answers.
Yeah, good answers for all of those, so I think that strike issue would be way down on the candidates list.
So number 7 here, outstanding local school board.
Yeah.
We'll just add that ourselves.
But you know what, to be honest, word gets out where there's boards that are sort of dysfunctional. Word gets out, it's gossiped about. People know where not to go or where you're going to have your hands full. And it's not to say there's a piece of cake. There is no such thing. Things happen during the year. You're always involved in some unexplained or unexpected
This is a complex
controversy or
district,
something.
just by its
But
very nature, but.
this does not have any negatives hanging over it. You know, the longevity of the superintendent is key. And then a new board, you'd be surprised how many boards are similar to yours, newly elected board members serving in their first term. All over the place we see that. There was a huge turnover 2 years ago with the last election. And so we got another election coming up. I don't know what that's going to look like, but you know, there'll be turnover. Then people get a little tired of giving up their time with no reward. In places where you get a reward, it's like seeing students.
No reward.
See,
We get to spend all this time with each other.
yeah, you get to go, you know, you need to. you
This
can
is not a
break
reward.
bread
We
with
got
each
free
other.
dinner today.
And some night you've got an audience full of students, and you get to recognize them, and you get to celebrate things, and then you're rewarding teachers for significant accomplishments, and those are really good parts of the job. I enjoyed that tremendously, you know, when I was a superintendent. And those are the things that you have to dwell on. Yeah, there's times when a student will bring a weapon to school or threaten somebody or there's bullying. You know, that's part of our business today. You deal with those kinds of things.
Well, thank you very much for coming and joining.
Thank you.
When do you plan to make your decision on?
Wednesday.
Oh, this week.
It's Wednesday.
All right. We'll be waiting by the phone. Thanks. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet all of you.
Thank you for coming.
Good luck. We'd love to come back and do this for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I'm a Sycamore grad. I'm a Sycamore grad.
Good to see you.
You are? Yeah. So, used to play Lakota in soccer a lot. Oh, yeah?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Phil, thanks. Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Ann. Appreciate it.
Yes, I know.
Thanks so much. Actually.
You too.
You too.
Thank you very much.
Eating.
Is it yours or mine? I'll take it.
We know each other. Have a good rest of the night.
You guys do, thank you.
I'm good, man. That's all I need. Appreciate it. Go
We
ahead.
lost Jane and Lynn.
Oh, Jane snuck out. It's getting a little long for her. She'll watch it on video, though. I think.
It's really.
Thoughts?
Want to give him a minute?
Oh,
We can't close the door, it's against
it's
the
an
law.
open meeting.
Open meeting.
And
Thank you for the reminder.
they are going to be able to see this on video, so remember that as well.
You're saying be good.
I'm just...
Be aware.
Now it's on the record
He
that
knows
you wanted
me
to
so
close the
well.
door. It's on the record that she wanted to close the door.
I made the Daily Herald comments, right?
You're the only one who's going to speak from now on.
Oh, just wait.
I like the fact that a lot of these candidates, or a lot of these groups refer to the longevity of our contracts.
Nicely done, Zubair.
I had to say that.
That's a definite positive. I'm not going to walk in here and negotiate a contract next year.
Well, that's totally true.
You know,
And
that's a major benefit.
DTU.
Right.
What's that?
Yeah.
DTU.
DTU, but everybody else is
year.
live with either a new contract.
Yeah, right.
at
The
4 or
bigger
5 years,
union.
Or the remainder of the
Right
10
now, they're
years.
all there, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's less, there are less things to walk into.
Yeah. There's a lot of good, I mean, they're all good now. I mean, we're doing discussion now, right? That sounds good.
Yes.
I like if we're debating between all three, so the question that you asked, Mike, the first two firms, and I think you kind of piggyback onto the third one. But I really...
I think Zubair did too.
Yeah, I took,
Zubair took
Oh, I'm sorry.
Zubair took it from
Because we were all waiting and then we weren't forthcoming, so we had to take it.
So,
Thanks, Zubair.
they all told me how great, they actually, seriously, came in, what a great question I had. I thought about that. I thought it was very relevant.
yeah, so I thought...
It's the vulture.
I thought on the second term, I thought Gary had a pretty good answer. I thought Harry kind of moved around a little bit, but Gary was actually the one that impressed me most with the second one.
So we thought it was the teachers union.
Knowledge of the
Gary
district, but Gary had the deep
jumped
knowledge of the
in.
district, was
Gary,
on
yeah.
all the issues.
Yeah,
that we had.
Gary came in.
It seemed like he did his homework. He seemed to know a lot about what we were doing, what was going on.
Okay.
Yeah,
He
Gary.
brought up the kindergarten piece and a few other things.
Right.
So I like that there was some deeper knowledge there.
But I think in
Gary.
this group, Mark Friedman had that same knowledge.
Yes. Yeah.
So you definitely saw that there was at least somebody in.
I feel like the second, yeah, I know it's the same thing. I almost felt like, yeah, the first group, I mean, I wasn't as impressed as the other two, in my opinion. Just overall, they had kind of a facial presentation, kind of, you know, they kind of sounded like a larger company that didn't understand what's going on here.
But they also had a lot more conversation coming from the principal that came in, I think, for damage control.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of time spent on damage control that would have been better spent with the other two, speaking about what they were actually going to do. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Speaking about what they were going to do.
Yeah, this is kind of just my impressions. I haven't made my mind about any of this. And the second group, I thought definitely did their homework. They knew, and so I just wasn't sure. I left the presentation wondering, like, what about their resources? We pool all our resources together, and then I was just like, okay, well, that was the one question I had in my head, like, okay, do they have enough resources? Are they going to have as much connection? Because you notice he kept on saying about, trust me, we have all the same contacts everybody else has. To me, I was kind of like, well, do you really have all the same contacts? That's what just came in my head. But they were really on board in terms of understanding our district, all the
Yeah.
I like the
issues.
I like that with the community engagement piece, you brought up 4 different translations for the survey and really to try to get as much input as possible.
Yeah, he seemed pretty tuned in with the community engagement, the second group did.
Yes.
More so.
Although my concern about the second group is they don't seem to have the track record with the large districts.
I was just going to say.
And to me, that is my biggest concern in hiring somebody, that we get somebody that doesn't end up having the ability to manage the complexity and to focus on the things that are really issues, but are issues for us because across 20 schools, we've got so many different moving parts.
Listing of clients, they had maybe 5 districts that were more than 10,000.
Right.
But they did 211.
They did 211, you're right. And they did Plainfield, which was like 20-some thousand students, but.
I like that Mark was the only one who pointed out not just the diversity of the district, but the diversity in the way that we sometimes look at it, which is more affluent versus less affluent population, in addition to just the ethnic diversity that we see across the district. They get that disparity, and I like that a number of them have come from districts nearby that are also diverse, like Morton Grove and Niles, and that they're local enough that you know they understand the dynamics at play in this community.
I mean, and then we haven't said about the third group. I just, it's a sort of, they have all these superintendents here. I just think they have a lot of, they also will have a lot of knowledge of the process and our district as well.
So I'm getting the feeling that we are whittling down to maybe group 2 and group 3. I mean, are we all at least in agreement between those two?
That would be my choice, but that's just me.
Yep.
I like that the third group brought 4 people in, so they knew the size of our district and kind of the undertaking. They said we want to bring a larger team on board, so they presented that way, which I liked.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So how do we do it now? Vote?
Although I tell you what, it's nothing to do, but Gary's mustache was.
You were jealous.
It was. It was rocking.
Well, there you go. We know where Anthony's vote's going. Guy with the mustache. I don't know. Do you what do you think?
I guess, I think Phil talked about a consensus model, and I think a consensus activity would be good. I mean, is there somebody that could not live with either group 2 or group 3?
No.
So you both, there's nobody here that says, no, I just can't work with group 3 or can't work with group 2. So you're in agreement on being able to work with both of them. So then I think you need to kind of elaborate what are the strengths of each and which seem to fit best with what you'd like to do.
I believe from a.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we say, let's go with each group individually and go through what we feel is each, like, if we start with group 2 and what we feel their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, and then move to group 3, so we're not bouncing back and forth between them, I think is probably the best way to start, so whoever wants to start.
I know go ahead, let's start.
Yeah, we can go this way. So I thought the second group, I thought they had probably the best presentation. They understood they had definitely done their research, understood specifically what the issues of the district are, their negatives, just our concerns about whether or not they will have the same talent pool, that they have the same connections or whatever to really be recruiting as heavily as we need to for this type of position. For the second group, or for the third group, sorry.
I think what we're going to do is just do.
Oh, we're just doing one?
Mike,
Okay.
just do
Yeah,
2 first, and then.
Good idea.
So group 2, outside of Zubair's comments, I would mention that I believe it was Gary again that had mentioned every single one of their superintendents had signed a second contract or at the end of the contract. So again, we're talking about longevity. And I know, again, BWP said majority, but there's a difference there. So in terms of just a quality longevity piece. And I mean, outside of that, I wouldn't have anything else to add outside of what you had, Zubair, and what we've already discussed.
I agree with you, Anthony, on the longevity piece for the second group. I liked that. I'm a data person to an extent, and I'd like to see what that data is associated with. Are we talking small school districts, large school districts, complex, not that complex? At what point in people's careers? So that's important to know. Are we more working with people that are close to retirement age, and therefore I'm going to do my last 8 years or 10 years at the same school district? That, to me, is a qualifier for that. But I do think that that's important, and I liked it. I thought Gary was knowledgeable as far as D15 went. I was not happy that Harry didn't seem to know what was going on. Yeah, that was concerning to me. And he was quick to speak, so if you're not 100% on the answer, let somebody else speak first. And quite honestly, I was a little concerned that there was no diversity at that table. And I'm talking men, women, whatever, but are we 100% certain, or I don't feel 100% certain that you're going to get a response? And that may be completely not the right answer, but I got that as a concern.
My turn? Okay, I thought from a pro standpoint that they do have a lot of Illinois-based school districts. Lots in the Chicagoland area. Kind of building off that from a con side is that the school district size and diversity within the school districts doesn't appear to be vast in nature. While they might have different diverse school districts, we have the diversity within the school district. Kind of building off everybody else pros. I feel like, again, Gary did do his research to some extent on the school district prior to coming and sitting in. So building off everything that you guys said, those would be two or three points that I noticed.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that's been said. I think the size issue to me in terms of the history doesn't surprise me as much, because if you look at sort of the spread of the districts, you're not going to have a lot of big districts. They just don't exist. So I think that's, to me, it looks representative in terms of a broad array. I think the local knowledge was big. The sort of lack of diversity I would extrapolate into is it as robust of a network as you'd want in terms of we know people who can get all these things. That would be the concern in terms of making sure you get as vibrant of a candidate pool, and that outside of the applicants, the recruiting is able to be represented there. Yeah.
So I agree with pretty much everything. I did like data person. I like the idea that they immediately thought, we have a very diverse group here, we're going to interview in at least 4 languages. We want to make sure we reach out to all the appropriate groups. That was a big yes for me. I also really like their idea of having finalists do some sort of presentation, even if it's to talk about their own board or their own district where they come from, just to get a sense of their presence in front of a room. So we might steal that even if we don't use this. But the one thing that, while I was happy they addressed it, I thought they kind of oversold a little bit the vetting thing, it was almost like a underhanded dig, knowing that we probably saw HYA first, or we were going to see them.
It was.
I get it, say it once or twice, but I felt like Gary went a little overboard with his, you will never get a bad candidate from us. It kind of started feeling a little icky after a while.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with the assessment. I think they both of the second firms, they knew what was out there, and they knew that was going to be a selling point. So
And they have to bring it up.
I was
absolutely an advantage.
I was a little surprised that the HYA guys didn't defend themselves a little more vigorously, but oh well. I really like I think Gary really was on the ball there, so that was good. I really think they pushed the community engagement aspect of it, which I was a little, which the other guys at first didn't push that, then they all of a sudden kind of fell back into it, so I was kind of surprised with that. But I like the fact they really wanted to establish the candidate profile. That was one of their key things that they pushed a lot, the second group. So I really like that aspect of it, along with the other stuff. And they seem to be very, grounded in the area too. So, the fact that they're teaching at Loyola, I don't know if that was a plus or a minus. I was kind of saw it both ways. I was like, well, they're developing this special, class there for teaching superintendents. So I thought, well, if you have to do that, you have to be pretty in tune with what a good superintendent is. So I saw that as being kind of a plus. The only negative was well, maybe that takes away some of their time. And then it was torn the same way with the fact that they already are doing 2 searches in the area, which I was like, well, that's good. People are using them. But on the other hand, is their time going to be divided? So I was a little torn on those 2 things, plus and minus.
Frank, do you want to start so that all the other things are said before?
Yeah.
You want to do number 3?
Yeah, the last guys, I did like there were 4 people. I thought that was pretty good. They're going to do that commitment. On the other hand, I wasn't, you don't know if that's just for show, or we come in, we, put on the show with 4 people. Really, 2 guys are doing most of the work. You don't really know. But it was good that they were putting that effort forward. The initial lack of putting the profile together, I was a little surprised at, but then they kind of went into it later. It was almost like it was out of order in their presentation. It was kind of weird. They're like, oh, we're going to jump right into recruiting, and then we'll kind of figure out what you guys want.
It was a slightly different order.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that. But, I think they're probably just talking about getting, I think my interpretation later on, as I thought about it more, was maybe they were talking about just getting the feelers out to everybody to get resumes in, get the batch of resumes in, and then using your input, we would filter them out. So I think that's what their approach was, which, I guess that's just a different way of doing it. That was
That was about it, except for, they did have, fairly decent answer about how to reach out to people not involved in the schools, so it seemed like they hadn't really thought about it completely, but it was, they're kind of thinking on their feet a little bit there. I don't think that question got put to the other groups of how they're going to reach out to people that don't have kids in the school district. It was only asked in the last.
Yeah, we didn't ask anybody else that.
Yeah, so that was a little bit hard to determine what the other groups would have said.
I agree. I really like the idea of the 4-person team, and I'll say all 4 of them impressed me quite a bit, whereas I think in the other teams there was always somebody that stood out as like, oh, that's the lead, like that's who I could see working with. And I thought they were all really pretty equally invested and all very enthusiastic and very professional. I'd be happy to work with any and all of them. I like that they've got experience across their teams and more diverse settings, as well as bigger settings like Phil, having come from bigger schools in Cincinnati and Indy, is kind of a draw. I think he has a good grasp of probably what a big district needs and a diverse district needs. So I felt like their background was really strong for all of them. I felt like for all of them, they all had a really good, solid, and very comprehensive kind of audit process, really, in terms of the groups that they would reach out to, and that they all have an online survey. So I'm not sure any one of them necessarily stands out so much for me on that aspect, as much as I just think that they really all have a good grasp that it's going to be a big process. And so I like that they had 4 people dedicated to potentially doing that. And they were, I think, comparing, like, it's not exactly an apples for apples cost when you compare their costs, because I think they had a few more expenses than Group 2 did. But I think they come out to be very similar in terms
Yeah, it
of
was
price.
a
Very,
plus
very similar.
$2,000 to $3,000.
Yeah.
They're both going to be about 20.
Exactly.
I think very reasonably priced.
Yeah.
So the 4 people, I like the 4 people piece, but I also like the individual accountability that it felt like you were going to get with the other ones, where it felt like this one was kind of everybody could jump in and do something, but on a day-to-day basis, that could almost be a little scattered.
I felt like, Dave, based on their proposal,
There'd be
the 2
20.
principals
Yeah.
are Ann Nolan and
Right.
Mark Friedman.
Right.
So they've got the bodies behind them. but
Yeah,
they
I
still
agree.
have-
So from a comparison standpoint, it felt like it was the all-in, but really it's, I don't know that it's different. But otherwise, yeah, I feel like there was a lot of comparisons. As we talk about the school size, they didn't list it out as clearly, so you kind of have to piecemeal it together. It doesn't look different to me. You got a few more of the comparable elementary districts right around here that make a good comparison point. But in general, good process, good timeline, similar from that regard.
I guess a pro that I saw that I guess we haven't mentioned yet is that the members that comprise their team are local. There's a couple of the 2 of them, I think. One was Buffalo Grove, correct, and one was Arlington Heights.
Yep.
So we have 2 that are local that understand our district just from familiarity by living in the area. And I think that's a huge plus from an overall standpoint. So them being local in nature, I think, is great. Building off, I think, Ford committing to us is great as well. And I think that they proactively approached the diversity issue, where I believe that came out after questioning with the other 2 groups. So I think that they recognize that we have a diverse demographically and geographically district, and I think that's big. Something that kind of took me back, I guess, from a count standpoint, is that they all kind of wanted to jump in repeatedly. It didn't seem like there was a true lead in there, and so that does concern me to some extent, but at the same time, there's an energy between the 4 of them that it kind of goes both ways for me. One, I see it from a standpoint of it being a positive because they're all energetic and looking to make the good impression, but also who's taking the lead, who's making sure that there's going to be a point person to come back to. It seemed a little bit convoluted to me at some point because they were trying to jump in on top of each other, and for me that was a little bit of a turnoff. However, I understand the reasoning behind it, I guess, saying that at the same time, so.
Yeah, and I hear you on that, the jumping, but I do agree on the energy.
Yes.
That there was consistent energy across the board. I also really liked the differences in personality. And you could see significant differences in personality type, a little bit of the outgoing, a little bit of the analytical. And if you're getting back to candidate pool, people are drawn to people that are similar to them. So it does give you a more diverse group of candidates that might be known to the team of them. I like the quantity of people. Again, I share the concern about the that there would be a focused lead, but I don't think that's something that's difficult to overcome. And I'm with you on the diversity. I mean, they hit it right hard. I'm a write down quotes person. We're diverse and comfortable in a diverse environment. That's exactly what they said right off the bat. And that to me is definitely hitting it straight on. And I got to be honest with you, I don't see any negatives. So.
Yeah, so outside of what everyone stated, I think, Mike, you brought up I think one of the most important points that stood out to me was that they're all local. So being able to mobilize with community feedback and engagement and so forth. I think as they mentioned, I don't know verbatim what they stated, but again, they made mention of that, that's critically important, right? That's a huge part of that process, is that engagement piece. The other part that they mentioned was really standing behind basically their firm. They said even surprised costs. I think when costs was brought up, any additional costs, I mean, we eat those. So I mean, they laid it out pretty clearly what some of those additional costs would be. But outside of that, we stand behind what our firm's going to deliver to you. And last but not least, I know mentioning the mentoring piece and slideshow. So both for the superintendent and for the board, I think for us being a relatively new board, that might be an important piece as well to consider. I think that's a hidden gem.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of the things that have already been said. I mean, the presentation felt comfortable. Like I felt, and maybe it's just because you heard the Buffalo Grove, you heard Arlington Heights, you heard that all, in fact, I feel like I've seen some of these people just, I don't know if they did that on purpose to make me feel that way, but I did feel that I've seen some of these people.
He's been being shot.
Yeah, it's like, but yeah, I felt it was very comfortable. I actually liked the back and forth. It seems like they're going to have a discussion, so it's not. You can really, everyone's going to say, well, we don't have a cookie cutter process. We're going to, and that's going to be for everyone's presentation, but they weren't even cookie cutter doing the presentation. So it was, they seemed to. I mean, the presentation wasn't as polished as the previous comment, but almost we got an insight into how they will be really looking at all the different factors and coming and thinking it through, as opposed to just giving us kind of the standard client or the candidate that's on the top of anyone's list. So I liked all those things. The negatives are, I guess though, I think the fear that Dave, you brought up is still there, in the sense that you don't want a situation where people are not organized and we're not getting, and I thought this put, to a degree, the fact that they had this kind of outline of how they did the last contract, allayed a little bit of those concerns, but that if there's any concerns, that's what it would be like. Can they, stick to a deadline? Are they going to be accountable and all that sort of stuff?
Right.
But I don't look at that as a huge issue because I just can't imagine they would do that.
Yeah. So go through. I mean, there's not a lot that differentiates the two. You look at the candidate pool or the client list and things like that, and it's similar. The capabilities are similar. It comes down to sort of the people in the presentation that he gave and the familiarity with the local. Gary had the better knowledge, I would say, or better articulation of the specific issues. The second group, I thought, did a better job. Third group, better job of articulating sort of the diversity than some of the selling points. I liked how Gary talked about the opportunity challenges with kindergarten and things like that, where you address the challenges, but the breadth of the group in the end probably brings a more diverse network and population from that end.
I got the sense, to your point, Zubair, that they would work collaboratively as opposed to, two people maybe working in silos who communicate, but don't necessarily work so collaboratively.
Yeah, I almost think like, if you're trying to find like really good candidates for us, I mean, you're going to come up with, maybe there's 40 people but I think it takes that type of collaboration between people and really kind of understanding, okay, well, this is what they want, and they want debate to go on
And
their side.
yeah, to not be afraid to debate it, or to not be afraid to put out something that doesn't work potentially about a candidate.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to step on somebody's
And
toes.
I think the mentoring thing, I was wondering, was that applause, or that's just something they put in there that, is not really that important? I don't know. I mean, it's probably overall a positive. I guess not so much that the mentoring is going to solve any problems. I don't think that will happen. But just the fact that they're going to be around, going to be around to kind of face the music, or,
Stand behind.
They called it out. We didn't have the chance to ask anybody else about it.
Yeah.
They said it was unique to them, but we didn't really get the chance to see if anybody else does. It might be, I didn't know if it was truly something distinct that they offer that nobody else does. I'm remiss to think that any of these that have sort of the longevity guarantee are just going to walk away from them all. But
And it may not be anything special, truly, that they're offering. It may be because she did particularly say that it doesn't need to be something done through them, but they would recommend it, and it could be through IASB or whatever. But she, kind of pulled it around to lots of options out
positioned it
there. Yeah. So, it very well may be something that they would all do.
And I think, Dave, you kind of addressed really, Dave, you and Barb talked about the cost structure. I don't think across all three, we're going to have the same advertisement costs. So that's not, the expenses outside of what the initial, I guess they're calling it a consult fee, is going to be the same across the board. So I think, especially if we're narrowing it down to 2 and 3, we're really looking at a net, almost minimal nominal issue. So I don't think that that's even something that has any sort of discussion.
And I think, and I think I'm showing where I'm leaning, but I think
it's okay if you show where you're leaning.
You have 4, they're very personable, they all have good personalities, it seems, just on this little, and that's probably going to mean that they have better relationships with potential candidates, and different types of relationships with different, so that's always a positive to me, because I still think you're going to get some people that are going to come that nobody knows and just applies into their like gems that, oh wow, we would have known somebody from such and such state. But most of the time it's going to be somebody who had a good relationship with somebody in the recruiting. I think that's always going to be the case. We're going to get a lot of our candidates are going to have relationships with the search firm. Sure.
And potentially all search firms, because I think that was something else that came out of the session that I attended, that more often than not, if a candidate is in the pool, they are looking, they will be at every search firm. If they're not looking, then it's about the relationships, and it's about who knows who and who's able to pull somebody quality in.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
And they've already got one lead.
That might be the guy, right? Or gal.
Right.
They'll tell Scott later.
And then we'll just keep calling you until you spill.
That was the bait.
The hook.
Yes.
So I guess my question to all of us is, do we have a major concern with going with either one of them, or are we really, the concerns are, minimal, if anything?
Concerns, no. I mean, I think it's minimal concerns.
Okay.
It's just which one's better.
Except the fact that the
I
arrows in the flow chart don't line up. The engineer was driving me insane. I gotta think that out.
Think of it like circuits.
I'm like, line up the arrows, and they're not straight. They're jogged for no apparent reason. I was like, you guys really got to clean up this slide. Put it in print and give it to me.
Frank's got a doggy, so he doesn't forget.
I need to pay attention to this.
That was killing me.
Make sure you put it on
This
the
is a
record.
big issue for me.
I've identified for any one of them afterwards. I could slip them back their copy and identify every typo in there. I'm really bad about copy editing. I've marked it all up.
They did swap like a
Aside from these two.
period in it.
Yeah.
We said superintendent.
We'll let them have their own conversation.
I was trying to find it again. It was in one of these, and I was like, how can you miss that?
So what do we do next?
Sounds like there's a consensus to me. Can you all agree on one of the two that are both acceptable?
Start out one side and
I heard more.
three.
We're going with the BWP.
Yep, BWP. Anybody?
Zubair's flashing hang signals.
Be the fast pitch right to
Seems
left.
like that's a consensus.
Yeah, I believe that's a consensus.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
How about you?
Hey, I'm not a part of this process, I'm facilitating, and it sounds like you've done a great job. I would caution you if I thought that there was a firm that wouldn't do the best job possible. And I think both of those two firms that you considered would both do really good jobs.
All right.
You have to do a
We
vote
just-
for this, or we just?
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
You just have to have a motion to adjourn whenever you want to leave.
All right. We have a motion to
I don't know
adjourn.
if Frank and Barb want to.
Is this over now? We're gonna go, or what?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.